We'll go ahead and start the pre-meeting, the West Jordan Planning Commission, April 19th, 2022. And we'll go ahead and start with our training. And if we have some time left over, we'll kind of review the agenda.
Okay, sounds good. So Larry just put up on the screen for you this chart that I think was distributed to you before the meeting today. Nothing magical about this chart. It's just my summation of the different land use processes you have. I've kind of updated it through the years. It's broken into two main parts, as you can see on the charts. The top part of the chart are those administrative land use applications you're involved with as a planning commission. And then on the bottom half of that chart is kind of the itemization of the we call them quasi-judicial recommendations, but basically recommendations to the city council that you're involved with. It's a tough concept for a lot of people that aren't involved in the land use process, the public, that they don't perceive or understand. A lot of times you're two completely different roles. In the first one, you're really not acting as a planning commission per se. When you're making an administrative decision, you're really a land use authority. And presumably a city could pick a completely different body or one person or whoever to make those land use application or those land use authority decisions. And in fact, in some instances, there are other types of land use authority decisions that are made by city staff, right? So it's one or two or a few people. But these major applications all come to you as a land use authority. And you do make the final decisions on them. And for the most part, and that's what's hard for the public to think about, is that the public thinks, I think a lot of times, that you can make whatever decision you want, right? That you have unfettered discretion to, if you don't like something, vote against it. And as you know, that's just not the case when it comes to these administrative decisions, that they're for the most part ministerial, right? You apply the ordinances, the law that's in place, and if the applicant meets all of the requirements of the application, you grant it. If they don't meet it, you deny it, or give them an opportunity to change and fix it. There's not a whole lot of leeway. It is pretty much going through the list, checking the boxes. Do they qualify or not? And it's hard, right? Because in regular life, we don't think that way. But and obviously, that's where the neutrality comes in, right? I mean, some of the times there might be someone whose application you don't really favor, but it meets the terms of the city code, and so you grant it. And likewise, it happens occasionally. There's an application you really like, but it just doesn't qualify, so you have to deny it. And most of these you see on pretty much every agenda, right? At least subdivision plats, site plans, conditional use permits. Occasionally we've seen temporary use permits. Every once in a while we see a special plan. I guess but those other three categories, especially conditional use permits, subdivision plats, site plans, you're seeing all the time, right? And as you see the staff reports, you know that the staff goes through those findings, the different parts of the code. There's typically 4 or 5 or 6 criteria for each type of application, and you walk through that. Or, a number of criteria maybe that you're looking at, and then you look at that staff report, and then you're able to come up with other questions and so forth too. Now, obviously, staff does the best they can, and there is the possibility they might miss something. That's why it's always good that you know the code yourself, or at least be able to ask a question. What about this code section? What about that one? Does that apply? By all means, that's part of your role too, right? The more of us that are looking, the less likely there is that we miss part of our own regulations that are applicable. So then, like I say, the bottom part of that chart, you're acting as a true planning commission or recommending body. And the language is kind of weird where we say a quasi-judicial recommendation, but really what that means is you're still kind of applying the law, right? You're applying the criteria and making findings, and it's doesn't mean that you can't recommend to the council there, whether you know that ultimately the council has unfettered discretion when it comes to them. If you find that you have recommendations on a zone change or whatever it might be, a text amendment, you can obviously, make your recommendation. The whole thing is, though, is you make those recommendations within the findings or criteria rather than not based upon anything at all, but based upon those criteria. And really, I think it's a great system, because if anything ever gets challenged in court, the first question the court asks is, were there neutral criteria upon which the decision was based? And if you can say, oh, yes, Your Honor, there's 5 types of criteria, the Planning Commission went through each of them, then you're much more defensible than if it was just a willy-nilly decision, so to speak. It's not that the quasi-judicial process, in my mind, is not to limit your discretion or to prevent you from passing along good ideas to the council. That shouldn't be the case. But it should be that when you make a decision, you're making the decision based on those criteria and findings. So, does anybody have any questions on any of those?
I just got one quick question.
Yeah.
And that is, we go through the findings and stuff, and if we disagree, then that's when we can go ahead and vocalize. I mean, like, my opinion would be different than staff's.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Because staff report's just a starting point. And and that gives you the ability to start somewhere, because you might say, gee, I kind of agree with staff on these 4 out of the 5 findings or criteria, but this 5th one, I don't, and here's the reason why. And that's the beauty of it, I think, is it gives you a starting point to vocalize what your concerns or thoughts are.
And I think that might be some of the confusion too, because I know, especially some of the newer members may not quite understand that totally. That, I mean, we still want everybody's opinion, right? So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where do the findings come from in code, and are they different for different purposes, or are they always the same findings that we're supposed to evaluate the proposal on?
Great question. So if you look out to that rightmost column, there are different parts of the code. So on that quasi-judicial, where you're recommending to the council, bottom part of the chart, if you look out to the right column, for instance, if it's a master development plan, it tells you the code sections you go to. That one's a little tricky because that's in the process of the council adopting that updated code. But if you were doing a text amendment, you go to section 13-7D-7B, or if it's a zoning map amendment, you go to 1377A. So it's different parts of our code, the general plan part or the zoning map part or the general plan amendment part of the code is where, at least in our city code, that's how we do it. We place those criteria there. Now, not every city has this process. We're probably in the minority. There's maybe not more than a dozen. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to guess, but there's probably not many cities in the state that have this process this refined. But I think it's great, especially for the purpose, like I say, several purposes. 1, it's legally defensible. 2, it gives you a starting point for your discussion. Any number of reasons. But unlike variances, which there's a set of 5 criteria, and every single city and town in the whole state follows those exact same 5 criteria, and that's just for Board of Adjustment or appeal authorities. Unlike that, for you as a planning commission, it's literally up to the local city code as to how it works. And like I say, we're probably a little unique, but I don't mind being the outlier if being the outlier is a good thing, which in this instance, I really believe it is. I can't take credit for it. It was one of my predecessors that
And so I think
Bob
George,
Thorpe put it in place.
there are different findings for a general map amendment.
Yes.
There's different findings for a zone map amendment. There's different findings for site plan and subdivision. So they're not just general findings, they're specific to the type of application. But they've all been codified and adopted by the city council probably 15 years ago. So
Mhm. Much better stated. That's what I was trying to say, but Larry said it better. All right. Any other questions before I go on to this other part real quickly? So the other piece that we were going to talk about is your bylaws, your rules. And in particular, you had 3 questions, I think, from the last training. One of the first of the 3 issues was currently in your order of when you hear a land use application, who you listen to first is you listen. Well, first of all, the agenda item is introduced by the chair. Then the petitioner or developer or applicant presents the proposal, and then the staff. There's a staff presentation, and that's kind of your, unless there's a reason otherwise, that's kind of your normal method of how you hear applications. So the question was, do you still like that process? If so, you just leave it. If there's for some reason you want to change it, that is something you do have the ability to change in your bylaws. Incidentally, I think we brought it up last time that if I remember correctly, I think the council had the reverse of where it was staff, then applicant, and they're actually shifting to what you guys are doing, which is some indication it's a good process.
And if I may, along those lines, we've all witnessed, because we've had this procedure in place for a while, where the applicant will get up and they'll kind of fumble around and they don't know what to say. And so regardless of what you decide to do, we're going, because the council is making this change, we're going to provide them with a cheat sheet, basically, for lack of a better word, of here's some of the things that you should consider. You know, they're willing, they can say whatever they want to forward their project, but a lot of times they're unfamiliar with West Jordan, they're unfamiliar with kind of the procedure, and so this just helps them kind of understand what might be important to the commission or to the council. And so we're moving forward with that, and for what it's worth, hopefully that'll help. Regardless of what the commission decides to do, the council the council leadership is already aware of that, by the way, and so that's what we're going to do from here on.
Yeah, being a Eagle Scout, that makes sense to me, right? Help people be prepared. So, but especially where, yeah, our processes aren't always intuitive, and so it's good to just let people know what they are. Second of 3 issues. So yeah. Oh, I guess I should let you give staff direction. Do you want to keep thinking about it? Do you want to keep the process the way it is? Do you want to change it?
I think we should keep it the way it is, unless
Yeah, especially if the city council's going that direction.
And it's obviously something you can always address at any time. All right. And then the second of 2 issues you previously talked about was after you hear the applicant and staff and have a public hearing, then there's an item on the list of procedures that the applicant can respond to staff and public comments. And someone mentioned maybe we could add at the end, if needed. I mean, if it's not required, it'd be kind of pointless to force something if it's not needed. We could easily add the words like if needed at the end of that one. Is that still something that you want to do?
yeah, I think that'll clarify it too.
Okay, so I'll make a note of that when we do go to present recommended changes to you. We'll include that one then. And then the last of 3 that you discussed last time, at least that I took note of, was if you wanted to have 2 different main categories on your agenda, that maybe part of the agenda is the planning commission is the final decision maker, and another part is the planning commission makes a recommendation to the city council. Sometimes I think more than anything else, whether it's on the agenda that way or not, if each item is presented that way, because sometimes the public does get confused and they think that there was a final decision made by you, but that zone change or text amendment still goes to the council. That's just a recommendation. Or the reverse, they might think a site plan or subdivision is going to go on to the council, but you've just made a final decision. I don't know. What thoughts did you have there?
I just think
Any
that
opinion?
whatever, every chance we have the opportunity to do so, we have to clarify for the public what is happening. And it's difficult for the public if they show up here thinking that their input is going to have a huge effect on the final decision, and we're not making a final decision. We've kind of deceived them in a way.
Right.
So whatever we can do to make it more clear to the public is what we ought to do.
Of course, when we make the motion too, it states whether it's a recommendation to the council or it's just approved.
Hmm.
So, I mean, either way, to me, it doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, at a minimum, you're mentioning that in your motion, right?
I think we should have that agenda lumped and said, this is going to be decided by the planning commission. This is going to be recommended by the planning commission. Because quite honest, I think half the time we forget what we're doing until we get into the motion of it. And then when we rattle off our motion really quickly, you know, we recommend to approve or we recommend a positive recommendation, right? People aren't paying attention regardless. So I think that anything we can do to help out would be great. I think
All right,
it's
so
like a simple
if I'm
decision.
hearing you want the agenda changed,
Yes.
okay, just so we're
I
crystal
think that's the
clear.
consensus.
Okay. And you wanted to say whether it's a recommendation to the city council rather than a legislative, so it's clear to the general public that they know that they'll have to come to another meeting if they want to hear the ultimate decision. Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, well, that's all I had unless you had anything else for
Do you got
training.
any other
So,
comments or questions?
thank you.
All right, thank you. We have, just trying to see how much, about 10 minutes left. Really don't think there's a whole lot of time to go through the agenda, so we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute recess if that's okay with everybody. Okay. It is now 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and convene our meeting from the West Jordan Planning Commission, April 19th, 2022. And we have all 6 commissioners present. So first on the agenda. No. Okay. So first on the agenda is approval of the minutes from last meeting.
I don't know which one I am anymore.
I think you're Pamela.
You're on. So
I'm Melissa.
Oh, I'm Pamela.
I recommend approval of the minutes.
okay,
Second.
we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries 6-0. Okay, next on the agenda, and these are all going to be public hearings, and I'll kind of explain what we want after we go through the agenda a little bit. So first off, this is Welby West, 8945 South, 4800 West, future land use map amendment for 11.54 acres from neighborhood commercial to high density residential and rezone from an SC2 community shopping center zone and an R110D ZC single family zone, 10,000 square feet minimum lots with zoning conditions. Zone 2 PRD H and planned residential development, high density zone and master development plan. Canyon Stone Capital is the applicant, and Todd Amberry. If you'd like to come up and, if you'll just state your name and address, you'll have to push the button to turn the mic on, and then when you're done, please turn off the mic.
Did that work?
Yep, the light's on.
Okay. It's red though, so I didn't know. Hello, commissioners. My name is Greg Hughes. My address is 472 Mid Lake Drive in Draper, Utah. I'm with the Canyon Stone Capital Group. Todd Amberry is on his anniversary, but I believe he's listening. I think he's participating online. Before you is an application. You have there are 3 applications in front of you right now. One is to review and accept our master development plan. The second is to amend the general plan as it's commercial. We would ask for your consideration to amend that plan, and then for the rezone that would be inherent to the master plan that I'm going to present. So if I could just start, the way I'd like to do is I have 10 slides, okay? And I'd like to just go over this project and kind of the process by which we went to get to what's in front of you. And so you're going to see about 5 versions of this plan as we began. So if you see one that you hate early, hang with me, because we have we went through a lot. I believe we went through a lot of good dialogue through this process. And so I want to show you that process and how this project kind of shaped and changed its configuration as we went through that process. So the first is that it's located, as you mentioned, it's at the corner of 90th South and 4800 West. It's 11.5 acres. It's across the street from the county library as well as the elementary school there. You'll see a road that's stubbed to the east of this parcel that has always anticipated the transportation solution to be a corridor through there, but has been stubbed since probably the early 2000s. So there's not been anything that's been in there to address that dead end of that road right there. So the next one is, and this is where, again, I just want to show you when we had our neighborhood meetings, I said, look, I can't compete against an empty field. An empty field has 0 trips of cars. I mean, there's nothing that an empty field isn't better than, because there's no activity at all on that parcel. But our baseline is what the permitted use and the zone allows for that land right now. That's what we would want to do better than. That's what we'd want to come to you with, a plan that would be better than the one that it is currently. The land use plan shows a permitted use for and a zone. So right now, the zone is a commercial shopping center, community shopping center zone. That's 2/3 of that parcel. And then the R110, R1 single family designation or zone. The permitted uses for the commercial can be anything from car washes, gas stations, offices, laundromats, dry cleaners, fitness centers, restaurants. Your general plan says that it's supposed to service between 10 and 70,000 residents. Services are what they're hoping to see develop there. I think the reason why it has stayed empty for as long as it has is that UDOT, looking at 90th South as a major arterial corridor, they've not allowed, and I tried, by the way, to see if there would be a way to get even one way ingress, egress from 90th South into that parcel, and they have been unwilling. They're looking to see that as a more highly trafficked road with less interruptions, and so accessing that parcel from 90th South hasn't been an option, and I think that's had a souring effect on the zone that it was in terms of neighborhood commercial, shopping center commercial. So I'm showing you right here the demographic that when we began this process, we believed, and we still believe, that you have a growing market of people, young but also older, where the prices of homes are going up so quickly that to find something for a younger family, or for someone that's a senior or active adult, it says 55 and older. I'm 52, so I'm in this new active adult category, I guess. It doesn't have to be as large in size. It has to be something that's viable in terms of affordability. It's not affordable housing or low income housing, but something attainable. And as you're watching the prices of homes go up, demand goes up. We're watching. We're one of the hottest markets for real estate in America. So you're watching those prices go up. The way that we wanted to arrive at this was through that parcel, is through an economy of scale. So if we can put similarly sized homes, and this is what I want to show you on this slide here, similarly sized homes from the adjacent neighborhood, but your lots would be a lot smaller, less yard to water, less yard to maintain, but the home itself would be similarly sized. The economy of scale of how many improved lots or homes you could put on that parcel would lower the price per home and per lot in terms of the development of the lots. So we want to be very aggressive on how we went through. But the home type is this, as you see: single family home detached, 2-car garages. That's 2 cars that are inside that park inside the home or the garage, with 2 stalls that people that would visit could park in the driveway to visit. That would meet code for parking. The square footages would range between 1,500 and 2,400 square feet. Here's the important part. When you have these small lots, you need to have a fully maintained homeowners association, because that homeowners association would prohibit parking on the streets, parking in places that make it hard to get around. There will be CCNRs that would require that those that purchase these homes couldn't use their garages as storage, but they would be actually used for the garage. And so there's some additional CCNRs and HOA requirements when you're looking for a higher density like this, where you want to have a single family home, 2-car garage, but you want to make sure that chaos doesn't break out because you don't have room to be able to do something like that. So this was our first version. This was one that was, I think that there are some similarly sized density lots. This would actually fit within the PRDH zone that we're pursuing. It was 108 lots. We brought this before, but let me show you the economics. This is why this was attractive to us. If we could put 108 homes on this, the economies of scale we felt would allow for a price point around $485,000. That would require an annual income around $72,000. Now, some of this stuff changes in real time as we're seeing interest rates rise and some of these costs. So this is a point in time. I can't say that all these are exactly accurate, but this was the logic of what we were pursuing as we were bringing this forward. We took that to the planning, the subcommittee that the city council has with not the design review, but the land use committee of the members of the council. In that review, and as they looked at that, they were very concerned about the density being far too high and not enough green space. So what you see is in that first blush meeting that we had with the subcommittee of members of the city council, we lowered that from 108 to 98 lots, and we wanted to increase the green spaces, trying to, again, we wanted to still stay within that an important price point for a market we think there's a lot of, and there's a lot of need, but housing supply is limited as we see prices climb. I want to draw your attention though, when you do take the lots off and your economy of scale starts to go down, you see that the estimated home value is about 534,000. Your annual income goes up to 80,000 to be able to afford it. And the median home price at this time of year, right now, well, October of 21 is 519. We're trying to stay within the median price. We think that's an attainable, that's the attainable housing that we think there's a strong market for. As we, on version 3, we brought this out. I met with some members of the council. We had, I met with an individual of the council who gave me some great feedback in terms of community gardens, green space, be a little more prescriptive on what that community space would look like that people would want to look at or would want to congregate or be around since their lots aren't very big. The trail, have a trail system that you can use for the walkability of the neighborhoods, things that actually added to the value, I think the quality of this development that I thought were big value adds to this. We took this site plan to our first neighborhood meeting on December 14th. So you'll see that we increased from the last version, our open space to 20%. We added 10-foot trails, and then we were prescriptive on tot lots and dog parks, and community gardens. At this point, these designations for the common areas are what we're getting by way of feedback. We're not married to what any of them would specifically be, but we're trying to identify what we're hearing in terms of what people would like to see. So we took that, that's the one we took to our December 14th meeting, and we got some great feedback. One of the concerns from, and I have to tell you that when we had these neighborhood meetings, the people that live exactly adjacent to this lot are the ones we should take all public comment, but those that live right next to it are the ones that you really want to listen to because it impacts them. I mean, right now it's an empty field, whatever's going to be there. That feedback from that immediate vicinity of that neighborhood carries a lot of weight, or at least it did with us in terms of we wanted to get it right. We wanted to earn their support. Early on in our neighborhood meeting, we said, we want to make changes, but we just don't want you to hedge your bet and dilute it so it's not so bad. But at the end of the day, you just still can't, you still hate it. We want to actually find something that you would support, something that you would like. One of the things they asked us to consider was if you look at the trail, it now goes along the perimeter of the parcel. And that was a request to pull the homes away from that fence line, to add trees. You'll see the trees and some of the things that we put along the perimeter. That's again meant to create privacy, pull the homes away so they're not looking directly into the homes that are directly adjacent to this parcel. And we, again, thought that was a value add. They thought for some of the community, the common space areas, if there was some parking that could be provided there, that would be appreciated too. Now we meet code of 2 stalls per single family home right now. The parking you see there would be in addition to code. That would be more than what code requires, but we again want to take into consideration the comments. The other part that was a really good idea that we've added here is that you'll see that on the road that comes through that connects the existing neighborhood to the 4800 West, the request was, can we have a committed left and right hand turn lane coming out of that development so that we could have cars could kind of queue that wanted to go left, cars that wanted to go right would go there. So we widened that area so that the traffic when leaving would be more orderly or actually just more commuter friendly. So those are the things that we brought to that we got from that meeting with with the neighborhood. We went to the another plan, the committee, I'm not going to get the name right. It's the land use committee, land use subcommittee. And they still felt that the density was far too high. There was a lot of concern. And frankly, even the neighbors that we met with on in December, they were concerned about the number of homes that were there. It's a balancing act because the less homes that you have, the more the cost of developing the homes on the lot. That number that inherently makes the improvement of those homes go up. So it's a balancing act, but these were good observations and good concerns that were being expressed. In that subcommittee meeting that we had, because there was a lot of frustration that we were still in that 98 lot number, we did, with that and the feedback from the neighborhood, we did reduce it down to 76 lots. So we started at 108. We're down to 76. It's good in terms of we said, can I quantify? Because I could show you the engineering when we were at the higher number. We felt that the traffic was significantly less than the commercial use. We thought that we had a lot of objective criteria that the higher number of lots would have worked. But when I said, so can we quantify what we get when we get less? Because we're pushing the price up when we do that, and we still want to be in this attainable housing market. And the best answer in the neighborhood meeting was, it's less. So just less cars, less traffic, less everything. So what you have in front of you for your consideration now is the fifth version, and this is with the 76 lots. The economics of that, though, if you look at the original, the math when we had more lots, and this isn't to criticize our own plan, but to show you that there's trade-offs when we do these things, and we make the accommodations, we do the things that we do. The trade-off is that you're spreading the costs of improving that middle road and the roads, as well as the cost of the parcel across less homes. And so you see that the estimated cost is now in the 689,000. The annual income to qualify for a home like that is 103,000. And the median home price in Utah is at 551. So we've gone above some of the targets that we had started out with, but we are proud of the fact that we brought before you for your consideration a plan that we think has had a lot of that collaboration and input from neighbors. There are some questions that are asked that you'd find in the staff report. We do believe that that this does promote good land use policy. We think that it's feasible. We think this is actually an impact that is less impactful than if you saw the commercial shopping center commercial zone fully developed. The continuity to the neighboring the neighborhoods and the homes next to it, I don't think would be as good. We think these single family homes, similarly sized as the homes in the neighborhood, but the higher density and more of them, we think that that's actually a better blend than it would be if it were commercial in 2/3 of that parcel. Let me see. So is this the last slide, Harrison? Yeah. So what I want to do, so that's the plan. My first goal is that you see this, and this is something that you would feel good enough to forward for the consideration of the city council. The second is to ask for your consideration in amending the general plan. And the general plan on page 54, I believe it says one of the things they want you to do is look at the natural development of your city. What's happening if you're seeing development happen, say commercial, and it's not happening in an area like this, that you're nimble enough to recognize that and change your future map, the future development of that area, and change its use. So we would ask you to consider changing that zone from a commercial, a neighborhood supermarket or shopping center zone and an R110 zone for a third of it to this a zone, a planned unit, a planned residential development, a PRD zone that would accommodate the project that you see before you. I do want to mention that when looking to when considering whether to change the master plan to allow for this housing, and even the zone request that we're asking for this PRD H zone, the things I'd also want to point out is that the range for a PDRH is 5.6 units an acre and can go up to 10 units an acre. You can get bonus density for the open space that you provide and for different things that you do. We qualified by way of math for 1.95 units per acre of density. We're not seeking that. We're asking for 6.6 units per acre. So we're not looking to push the PRDH zone and what it's allowed based on this process we've gone through. But we do think that that is a good mix. It keeps our prices where we hope there'll be a strong market for them. And so the density, while it says PDRH, we're not being overly aggressive on that. We're walking away from bonus density that did not come out of the process as we went through with the city, the staff, or the neighborhood meetings, the staff, and members of the council. The other issue I wanted to bring up, and I believe it's in the staff report as well, is that the legislature, of which I had zero to do with, passed a bill about accessory dwelling units, and ADUs apply to your R1 zones. And what that means is that if you have a way for a basement apartment that someone can walk out independently, and I even think it includes structures if your lot's big enough, there isn't any city zones that would prohibit accessory dwelling units in your existing R1 zones. The reason I bring that up is that when you look at an R110 or an R18 zone, your predictability on what your density is actually in question now, because you don't know if that option is going to be exercised, where someone will look to seek income from that home from an accessory dwelling unit. PRDs are ADU proof. Too many acronyms there, but the planned residential development, you cannot have it. It doesn't fit, but the state statute does not apply. The accessory dwelling units do not apply to the planned residential development zones. So what you see here is what you absolutely get. And so I would point out that where you're looking at the other densities in the neighborhood at the R110, where there is that unknown about how many people would exercise ADUs and what the density ultimately would be in those neighborhoods, this one is exactly as you see it. This is the 76 units. This is what you would receive. This is what you'll get, and there isn't any gray area as you're seeing with the R1 zones. And so I'm going to leave it there, but I'm open to. I was listening to your process. If there are questions, I'm hoping that staff. Oh, utilities. This is a really big one. The staff report has some of that that says that, look, we know we have to have the water, we have to have the sewer. We know that the current, it's this, I had this written down, but my notes are my handwriting's too sloppy. The staff report says that, I think it's on page 9, that, no, page 8 of the staff report says that the proposed amendment does not, constitutes an overall improvement of that's not the one. The current zone and what we're proposing doesn't add any increased water or sewer to this area. This area, whatever the zone and land use was permitted for water and sewer, that is, it has not been increased or a greater demand put on it with this application that's in front of you right now. The report says that we would have to have that agreement, city and developer, the planned development agreement, worked out on how the water would be adequately provided, as well as sewer, how it would drain and be adequately sized. I want to point out that since that report was written, and again, I think staff can confirm, it's not an unknown answer. We know that we can drain. If we wait for 4 months to hook up for the water in a development like this, there will be adequate water, as per Greg
Davenport.
Greg Davenport. And then we also know that we have two options with the sewer. We can send it to 90th South, where we were told that we have capacity, or we could take a smaller portion if we have the capacity, and we would look to see if we have the capacity to send some of it to the north and then the rest to the south. But we do have options that have been agreed upon as ways forward that we would ultimately have to agree to. City would have to agree to that as well, that the utilities are satisfactory, planned for in a satisfactory way. So with that, unless I've missed anything, I'm open to any questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yes, please.
Commissioner Allen?
If the noting some of it's already R110, some of it's commercial. If the entirety were turned R110, how many lots would you be able to get out of it?
Do we know how many on the R110? Around 50.
Okay, thanks.
So and so that's a good question. But as we lower the number of homes, we see the price that continues to climb, and that's still even in a climate where interest rates and things are going up. And so we think at 90th South and we think it's a good buffer. We feel really strongly about a price point that's more attainable than not, and fewer lots ends up pushing that price higher.
Commissioner Quiddy?
So I've been doing a little bit of math work here. The 50 is what I came up with. I'm curious what the median home price you guys come up with. You've got 551 for the state. I'm curious what your find it is for this area. Because as I'm talking to a buddy who lives a stone's throw from here, lives on the 3rd acre, so he's at about 14,000 square feet instead of 10,000, which is what it's zoned for, is at 550.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious how as we continue to scale down the number of lots, that the price continues to shoot so much higher and higher when we have houses in the area that are probably in about the 550 range. It's probably about right. But suddenly we've got these tiny little lots with these tiny little homes that are going to be $670,000. To me, that doesn't make sense.
For me, without taking into consideration the market increasing in terms of, we've gone up 28%, I think, at least over the last year in terms of house prices going up, but just raw costs. The fewer lots you have to pay for the improvements of the sewer, water, the road that connects there, you reflect that cost onto the finished lots that you have. So there's an inherent increase in the cost of the home. Just if you have, it's just an economy of scale. If you had one house, then whatever all those costs would be for the road and the open space, you would bear all that development cost to improve that lot on just one home. So the more homes that you have, that's how we keep the price of that home lower than higher. So if we push that price down lower on just math without even taking into consideration interest rates going up or any of that, you're reflecting a higher cost to improve the lot when you're pushing down the number of homes that are on the parcel, because you have some hard costs that you're going to pay for it to improve it, regardless of how many lots or homes are on that parcel.
Go ahead, Commissioner Shelton.
I have a question about the traffic. You say that that if it was commercial, that the traffic would be much higher.
Yes.
My thought is on this, if it's commercial, the traffic is happening at different times of the day. It wouldn't be as much of a pinch point as residential traffic would add. Can you address that?
Sure. And you know, that works both ways as well, because during the day, you're not seeing the same amount of traffic during the day with the residential. Our traffic engineer, and this is reflected in the staff report as well. With our traffic study, we saw for the commercial zone plus the R110 zone, if you were to put the daily trips on that parcel, our traffic engineer says that's 3,970 trips a day. When we were looking at the larger number of lots, we were at 1,022 trips a day. So that was a significant decrease. At 76 homes, we have 808 trips per day. But let's say, and I've heard this by way of observation, that the commercial and combined with the R110 was too high at 3,900 trips per day. Cut it in half. Say it's half of that. That's 2,000. We're still looking at a total impact in terms of trips per day at 808. What we also did is we put drones in the air during pickup or drop off and pick up during school, as well as the rush hour in the morning in the 8 o'clock to 8:30 hour, as well as in the evening at 5 o'clock hour. And what we found, we did it twice, because when we had our first neighborhood meeting, they wondered if in September, if a lot of kids might have walked, if less parents were driving. So we went back up in January with the drone and looked to see when we had congestion at the intersection. And there are numbers. We chimed it every 3 minutes. But we do see a time period. It's between, it's a few minutes. It's not like an hour or 30 minutes. It's from say 8:21 to 8:25. You see the largest stack up of ingress into the school, coming into the school at 7 cars. At the 3 p.m. to 3:20, again, 7 cars were the longest line. When we went to commute times, we had from 8 to 8:30 our largest stack up of cars. That's in one. That's not all cars going through the intersection, but that's one line. Say going left on 9. Say you're on 48th West heading and you're going south. You want to go left turning east. The largest stack there was 14 cars. That lasts 3 minutes from 8:20 to 8:23 when that number goes down. We have spoken when we tried to see if UDOT would allow us access to the parcel on 90th South. we explained that our reason is because of these times where you see the stack happening. And they said that one of their solution to that, they did not believe that this was a congestion failure situation, even with our numbers, but they did believe that they could adjust that left-hand turn signal longer and make sure that the flow, when we identify the times where that is stacking up particularly long, at 14 cars in that morning commute and 12 in the afternoon, they said they could or not that, yeah, it's not that high in the afternoon, but anyway, they can adjust that light and address the stacking that way as well. They'd rather do that than give us the entrance or egress or ingress into the parcel from 90th South, but they thought it was manageable.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hughes.
Thank you.
If you don't mind turning up the mic.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Larry.
I think the applicant explained his project quite well. I want to add a couple of things. The traffic impact study was part of your staff report, and if you notice, the applicant's professional engineer, traffic engineer, did not recommend any mitigation for any traffic that was created by this development. I just want to point that out. And that traffic impact study was done by the applicant's professional, which is licensed by the state of Utah. The other thing, Mr. Hughes brought up the utility issue. I have confirmed with Mr. Davenport that if nothing is built within 4 months, if it waits 4 months, then there will be adequate water supply. I know the commission has heard for the last year or 2 years or 3 years that, and Commissioner Ammon, you're fully aware of water issues. There'll be water available because of construction of new reservoirs. The other issue is the sewering of the project. If the applicant is to go into the line at 90 South, there is capacity there. If they choose to go through the Whispering Pines neighborhood, they will have to pay for sewer upgrades as a project improvement to make that work. And so other than that, I'm just here to answer questions if you have any of me.
Any questions for staff? Okay, we will turn this over to the public hearing. I've got a couple of comment cards here, which I'll read off your name, and then you can come up and speak for 3 minutes. After I've called all of the names, then we'll go ahead and open it up to anybody else who would like to speak. You will be given 3 minutes. Remind you to keep your comments short as possible, and if you see a lot of people making the same comments, if you could refrain from just repeating the same comments. Just as a aforementioned too, we did receive a whole bunch of emails. I know we received emails for this one too. And so this will be entered into the record. But just to let you guys know that that has been occurred and they were negative responses. So we'll go ahead and Deborah Stewart. And remember, you have to turn on the mic.
There we go. Is that right?
Yep.
I apologize for the way I'm
Can
dressed.
you bring it down? So yeah, there we go.
I apologize for the way I'm dressed. I'm a realtor. Normally I'm doing home improvements. I live right there. And it's important to me that my home values continue to increase. I've sold several homes in our neighborhood for friends and family, and recently was selling one that's very close to here. And if you're aware, if you go down Old Bingham Highway, just a little bit east of this subdivision, there's a whole group of low-income housing. And because of that, we had a full price offer withdrawn. It was a cash offer from a home we were selling because they saw that. We don't need more of that right next to, he's trying to make it out like it's going to be low income because of the density. That's not low income. what they're asking for those homes. Where people try and shame us into the idea that we need to build bigger, more and more houses in smaller and smaller areas to make room. That's happening all around us. If you go a little bit west of us, there's such high density. And I saw on our program tonight, more high density. We need to stop and think about the residents who already live there, who are keeping our homes nice and improving them and trying to make it so that we die in those homes. We don't want to move. I built that house myself. I helped frame it. I put the rock on the front. I don't want to move. So we don't want high density housing right next to us. That's not fair. When we bought our lot and developed it, we were told that would be the same as what we are, at least quarter-acre lots. And that's not, when you go to that, that's not a quarter acre. And so you need to take into account that us who built our houses 25 years ago were told that wouldn't change and that our values wouldn't go down. And now the train got allowed again, which wasn't running then. And now this. That's not fair to us who put so much time and effort and money into our homes to be sure that we could live there and have the value there and not have homes that, even if you have an HOA, those can be revoked. And where are those? You have 2 parking spots, big deal. So if you have elderly people there and their family comes to visit, where are they going to park? So you have a couple of extra parking spots. They're going to be on the streets of the neighborhood. And is that fair to us? It's not. And is it fair to the people who are buying in there thinking, no, it's not. It's not fair to any of us. And so those things have to be considered, is that you're going to lower our values of our homes and you're going to make the congestion at an elementary school. That needs to be thought out a little bit more, because I don't know if you live over there. I bet in his Draper home, he doesn't have a high density.
Your time is up.
All
Sorry.
right. Thank you.
Okay, Aaron Baugh.
Thank you. I have similar concerns with the traffic and the like. It's a concern. And I was thinking about this as well for emergency vehicles or any sort of a fire issue. I don't know how you're going to get them down in those end routes. That's a concern. And of course, sidewalks. I'm glad to see the trail. That's a good thing. But it just seems like it's a little out of place for what we're doing here. We have low density or high density, low income across the street, directly across the street to the south. We have some high density apartment complexes just up the street on the top of 90th there. And there's more going in, obviously. So, and I love West Jordan. I've been here for 24 years. But I do watch South Jordan, and I'm not here to make any, because I'd rather live here because I know what they're paying in taxes, right? But at the same time, we need to maintain some standards, and I'm so tickled that they actually went down from 94 to 76. But I wonder if we could do a little more with this plan to make sure that it is just right. I'm counting there. It looks like we have 12 auxiliary parking spots on the main road. And as Debbie said, if I was a retired couple and on a Christmas morning or a Thanksgiving, they're going to be parking down Red Pine, or they're going to be parking over at the library. And if they actually have a sense of public safety, they'll hopefully come across light at the crosswalk. But I can surely see somebody just running through across 48 there. And so that's a concern as far as extra parking spots. And just in general, to make sure that I'm glad it's an HOA idea. That's certainly good too. But like Debbie said, those can be removed and eliminated. And that we have that same problem just south of us across the 90th. It's kind of gone downhill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's all signed up for this particular item on the agenda. So if there's anybody else that would like to speak, come up to the podium, speak your name, your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Jay, I do have one person that just raised their hand.
Oh, okay.
Spencer Reel.
Okay.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Spencer Reel. I currently live in Taylorsville, though I did used to live in West Jordan, and I am a school teacher at the middle school on the other side of Copper Hills. And I attend these meetings because I am just so disheartened whenever I hear people complaining about traffic or complaining about sewer and water. I had to move out of West Jordan because it was entirely impossible for me to find a place to live in West Jordan. Looking at these home values that have been negotiated upwards and upwards and upwards, it's just so sad to see the people who currently live here think that they have every right to all the land that's around them. It's just a classic case of getting up the ladder yourself and then turning around and pulling the ladder up after you. We're in the middle of an unprecedented housing crisis, and this is not the way to solve it. I'm in favor of more housing for more people, and all of the little quibbles that I've heard so far are just sad to me. So thank you for letting me share my thoughts.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up again. If anybody would like to speak on this item, we'll be given 3 minutes.
Chris Hupp, 8564 South Burnt Oak Lane. I also think it's sad that we think that this is going to be the traffic issue, where the commercial development is a destination. You're going to get, I don't know, at least 3 times the amount of traffic. You have 76 homes, approximately 1.2 to 1.6 working individuals in that home, which means you're going to get maybe 3 trips a day. Times 76 times 3. That's what your actual traffic is going to be. Turn it to commercial and you're putting more traffic on my streets. I do not want that. Okay. First thing. Second thing, these have garages, 2 parking spots. Then they have driveways, 2 parking spots. That's 4 parking spots. Do we really want to make a community of a parking lot right next to us? That's stupid. Sorry for saying that, but it just is. In addition to that, if we do make this a parking lot, your values will go down. This will not hurt your values. Frankly, if this was an apartment, I'm not saying that. I don't want that. But if this was an apartment complex, your values would go up. That's statistics. That's legitimate facts. That's tons and tons of research. And anyways, you have 90th South. That is your key spot for public transportation. You put your intensity there. You don't bury it in a community. You put it along 90th South. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay, then we're going to go ahead and close this to public hearings and bring it back to the commission for comments.
Thank you. I would just like to reiterate the comments that Spencer made. As I see West Jordan residents and families being priced out of the market, and we look at what this ended up at to get 76 lots, and it is definitely not low-income housing. This is not low income at all. I think it would be a great addition to our community. I appreciate Cornerstone for the work they've done to try and meet the needs of the community, plus provide a somewhat lower cost place to live. And I think all of the problems can be addressed. I don't believe that traffic will be impacted with just 76 homes. And it would be really lovely if we could have our families live here and work here and afford to stay here. And I think this is an attempt to make that happen. So thank you.
You go ahead. Oh, Commissioner Shelton.
So I do live in this neighborhood, and so my views may be tainted, but I feel like this plan does not fit with the neighborhood that is surrounding it, and therefore should not be approved, in my opinion.
Commissioner Allen.
These are always fun, aren't they? So first off, I'm going to say that I don't think this area is likely to be a big commercial draw, especially since we don't get the connection off 90th. So to that end, I full agreement. Yes, it ought to be rezoned away from commercial. That said, it's a nice idea. It's a beautiful setup. It's the wrong location. If we're appreciating, if we're looking for affordable housing, I appreciate that we need to do that. We need to look for it in the right place. We need to look for it in places that are consistent with surrounding neighborhoods. Trying to think of how else to phrase this. At the end of the day, it really isn't a low cost based on what we're seeing here. I know 76 lots versus 108 lots. I think 108 would be even worse. I really think if we're going to rezone this, it should just be R110 straight through on the entire section. Keep it consistent with the surrounding community. And then let's take a look at areas closer to mass transit that this could work for. I mean, west side of the valley is in potentially very bad shape. I live out there as well. The roads are getting more and more crowded. We do not have mass UTA style transit out there. Our commercial districts are sorely in need of expansion. We simply don't have the infrastructure to support adding more and more and more people and asking the west side to take that burden of the high density housing. So to that end, I'm open to making a recommendation that we rezone the entire thing to R110. I'm not interested in this planned development.
Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen, I have to disagree. This is on 90th South. It's 48th West, 4800 West. I think it's a perfect location to put housing that is of this high density. I think an HOA will solve so many problems. Comments have been made about parking. HOAs generally do not allow parking overnight. So if you have a family party coming and you're there for a few hours, it's not a problem. You can park on the street. But R110 only creates the same problem we've got now. Is we do not have enough housing in West Jordan. Think of the price of the home. If there are just 50 homes on these lots with the improvements that are needed, we're getting up, $1.5 billion range. And that just is insane to me. So I really feel like this is the perfect location for this. It's not ideal, but we're not in an ideal situation. We are trying to accommodate families and workers who want to live and work in West Jordan. And I think this does that very admirably.
Point of information, it's information. It's not meant to persuade either way. If it was to a comment, I just wanted to.
No, I'm sorry, sir.
We'll bring you back.
Sir, if you'd like to speak, you can speak for just a couple minutes, but please come up to the mic.
We need a motion to suspend the rules before we allow him to speak.
Let's see.
Never mind. I will try that. He's allowed to read what she said.
Yeah, you can. It probably is best procedurally just to have a motion to suspend the rules. So.
Okay, do I have a motion then?
I'll make a motion to suspend.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'm not looking to respond to any of the comments that were made. I just want, for point of information, when it was referenced about mass transit and tracks, this is actually adjacent, even statutorily, within a half a mile of the old Bingham rail station. That's a 10-minute walk, a 2-minute bike ride, and 1 minute in driving to park and ride. So it is, even as the state statute looks for higher density around track stations. I failed to mention that in the presentation, but this does fit inside that land use.
Thank you. Commissioner Quinney.
Yeah, thank you. I gotta admit, when I came into this and realized that we had, the last time it was on the agenda, the staff was opposed. I was grateful for that. When I saw this, that the staff was in favor, I was ready to find all the reasons why I should vote against this, why I should vote for a negative recommendation. But listening to the presentations, listening to the comments, I'm on the side with Commissioner Hatch. There's no price point where this is affordable. It doesn't matter. Let's not pretend that there's an affordability opportunity here. And I know, I'm sitting next to a neighbor who lives there. I'm texting with several other people who live in the neighborhood or talking to me. And I know everybody's very much opposed to it. But as I do the math on this, if we drop this to R110, we reduce 12 lots, 14 lots. And now we no longer have the control of an HOA that keeps the cars off the street. So as to the last comment that was made in the public comments, now we've got houses with congestion on the street. I mean, I hate driving through my neighborhood when I've got neighbors parked on both sides of the road, right? And we have third and quarter acre lots, and that's a lot of space to have to drive in between cars. I don't want to. I don't think that that's fair. I think if we drop this down to like an R18, then we're getting to like 50 lots, right? That becomes a little bit more realistic. But as we're looking here at these prices, our prices keep going up, right? Yes, the houses in the neighborhood around it might be $550, $600, $650, even $700,000 for existing houses, but that doesn't take into account, as Mr. Hughes spoke to, the improvements that need to be made and need to be shared across the board. I think that this. I'm not a fan of 3,500 square foot lots. I don't think anybody would sit here and say, yep, sign me up for 3,500 square foot lots. It doesn't make sense, right? But we're in a position where we need to find creative solutions in smaller parts. And the reality is, the only finding that I can find where this even has a real pain point is in A, right? If making the recommendation to rezone this and allow PRD on less than 20 acres, right? If this were 20 acres, I don't even think we'd be really having this conversation. In my opinion, that's the only place where we have a pinch point. And I think that we can find that the applicant has demonstrated enough value that this supports and receives my support tonight. Thank you.
Any other comments, or somebody want to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Okay, Commissioner Hatch.
The first of three. Based on the findings set forth in the staff report, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve the requested master plan development.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
Nay.
We got 3 nays.
Is that 3?
3. I voted nay. So we've got Commissioner Shelton, Commissioner Thomas, and Commissioner Allen.
So
Well, that's
under your
high.
rules, then that motion fails, so someone can make another motion.
Just assume that the opposite's going to fail too.
Do you want to?
I'd like to hear the reason why you're on the nay side. We've heard from Commissioner Allen. We've heard from Commissioner Shelton. I'd like to hear what you got.
I just think that, again, that we keep changing the master zone plans, and we just keep changing them over and over again. And I think at one point we need to just say, okay, this was zoned for a certain thing, and we need to be a little bit more on point. I mean, I realize this is probably not a really good fit for commercial, and I would agree with you on that. However, taking into effect some of the neighbors and what it was originally even zoned for, I think I would agree with even Commissioner Allen that maybe if we did this on a 110 instead of a high density. That's just my 2 cents worth.
I think maybe one of the other things that I get hung up on is, I forget what we've changed the name to, but we got the cap and grade. We're already fighting. We're never going to hit what the city actually terms is appropriate for that cap and grade. And here we are continually increasing to high density in areas.
The cap and grade is a multifamily to single family ratio, so it actually improves the cap and grade.
That's a good thing.
But if you don't have any other motions, then this would just go as a negative recommendation to the City Council on this. It would count as a failed, since it's a failed vote. You have to have 4 positive votes to be able to advance it as a positive recommendation.
Do I have any motion, or we'll just go ahead and, okay, it has failed?
But then you still do have 2 other items to
I'd
vote
be
on,
happy
right?
to move
That was the
forward.
first of three.
I'll be
Okay,
happy to move
Commissioner
forward.
Hatch.
Based on the findings set forth in the staff report, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve the general plan land use map amendment for this application.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So we have 3 nays and 3.
And I'll make the final motion.
Okay.
Based on the findings set forth in the staff report, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve the rezone request for this application.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. 3 and 3. Okay. We'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the cottages.
Sure. Could you, for the benefit of the people here, could you explain what happens next?
Okay, yes, that's a good, thank you. This does go to the city council, so this is not a done deal. We're just a recommending body. And so there'll be one more time you'll have a chance to express your viewpoints and stuff to the city council. So that will be the next step. Now we're on item 3, the cottages at Parker Place Development Plan Amendment, 7430 South Redwood Road. Recommendation to amend the development plan, eliminating the requirement for masonry wall from Liberty Homes. And Scott, you said you wanted to speak before we called up the.
Yeah, thank you. And the reason why commission is that this is sort of an abnormal application or request. Is you read through it, you know, if you compare this particular request to the last one, there were very clear findings of fact in your staff report. This one, there isn't any, and that speaks to the uniqueness of this request. And you'll notice that there's a negative staff recommendation in this particular report as well. And Ms. Elgin and Larry Gardner can talk about that. But essentially, there were no findings to bounce our professional opinion off, other than the fact that the city council, when they approved this little infill development, approved it with a wall. And so typically, you'll see our recommendations based off of city council adopted ordinance or elements in the general plan that the city council has approved. Well, the city council approved a wall. So because there aren't any concrete facts to really counter that previous approval, that's why you have that negative recommendation. I must say, though, our zoning ordinance does go into a lot of detail about fencing and screening between different uses. And if a development like this were to come in today, we would apply our current code. And we would look at the surrounding context of this neighborhood and say, okay, it's residential versus residential. Normally, the code does not require a fence, residential to residential. At least wise, a 6-foot masonry wall that was above and beyond that this developer proposed. It got approved, and now we're here with a different applicant. He's not the one that originally got the approval, but he's coming back to the commission and then ultimately to the council, who has the authority to overturn their previous approval. So hopefully, with that context, I just wanted to set the table that this is sort of a unique request. We're not vehemently against vinyl fence or no fence or masonry. We're sort of neutral. And given the fact that the council has approved a masonry wall, we're stuck with that.
Okay.
Now that you're all confused,
I'm sure there'll be some questions.
All right.
Okay, Joshua Ship, if you'd come up and speak, please.
Josh is the one that actually did the application, but I'm Brian Pearson. I'm the general manager for Liberty Homes.
Okay.
So I'll be requesting, Josh is just the one that made the application. Yeah, the reason for the application is, reading through a lot of the sections, I don't need to familiarize you guys with your own findings in section 13 about fencing and everything. Most of a residential development would require just a a vinyl fence or you know, an opaque, the term's opaque fence as opposed to a masonry fence. You know, it doesn't surround any of the things that would require, you know, major streets, railroad tracks, or open waterways, those types of things. It borders the apartments to the north. It borders the Drake farm to the west, and that's major. The rest of it around there is just residential. You know, that zoning. So that's why we're just making the request.
Okay. Are you doing this, Larry, or is Lisa? Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions for the applicant? Getting ahead of myself here. Okay, Commissioner Allen.
So outside of just happening to look through code and realizing that it's not required, what's driving the initial application included a wall? What's causing you to step back and promote something else?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask that question. You know, a lot of it has to be, it's my dealings with staff, to be honest. And some of the things that, you know, we weren't the original applicant, but my workings with staff prior to us acquiring the property, and certain things were just said to us that if we submitted the application would just go through. And it was more based on the zoning administrator as opposed to going through the planning commission or the city council. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I'm more curious about just why the change from masonry to a vinyl.
Most of it's cost, obviously. That's the major one. You know, you're talking over 100 and something a foot as opposed to $30 a foot. So I mean, it's mainly cost. There's already a fence that exists on the north boundary, and so to put a masonry fence in front of a masonry fence or a vinyl fence, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, my team's meeting with the Drakes and the mayor and some of the city council even on site. Even the Drakes that are bordered to the west have made comments that it would make no sense to put a masonry fence in front of a vinyl fence. They have made those comments, and so I mean it's you know, since we at Liberty Homes have acquired the property, we feel like we've done nothing but benefit the community. My working with staff, I can say nothing but positive things about our workings with West Jordan City. And, you know, from Larry and his team all the way through trying to get the plat recorded with Dave Clements and others, I have nothing but positive things to say about city and staff. And we just want a real amicable relationship and hope it remains that way.
Maybe one more follow-up, just clarification. So the north side already has an existing vinyl fence. Does any of the rest of the perimeter have an existing fence?
It doesn't. So, you know, parcel A is not a parcel that we acquired as part of the development, even though it's all encompassed into the cottages at Parker Place. So lot 15 was retained by the original developer as well as parcel A. And so the only fence right now is on the north border.
And would your proposal be just to leave that existing fence, or would you remove and replace it?
To leave what's there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not in disrepair in any way, but obviously during course of construction, if things get damaged or whatever, obviously there would be replacement.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, Lisa.
Good evening. I guess with Scott's context and the developer's presentation and Commissioner Allen's questions, there's not a whole lot left for me to say. I will add that when the original developer started this, he thought of the seniors when he said he wanted that CMU wall. It most definitely between the north. That was his concern. That's why he added it. And that's about all I have to add, unless you have any more questions for staff.
Any questions for staff?
I'm going to ask a whole bunch here. Scott, I'm going to aim this more at you because you gave the very succinct, although it's going over my head and I apologize for that. So I'm starting to catch up on this. So the reason staff is giving a negative recommendation here is just because that was the original plan approved by the city council. So we're going to stick with that. Okay, thanks.
Now I do got one question. This might be towards Duncan. What is the ramifications or what is the procedure? I mean, if we vote to remove that wall and override the city council, well, we're making a recommendation, but so they have to that's what I'm asking. Do they have to re-vote on that again then, or?
Yeah, ultimately it's up to the council if they
Okay.
want to change what they've previously approved. And in fact, that's part of the situation we're facing is over the last several months to a year, there's been a policy change, and that's been in the process of being completely codified right now. You know that you recently voted on the zoning administrator code text amendment, where if any time the planning commission specifically has a requirement like a wall or a fence, then only the planning commission can undo it, not staff by itself. And the same with the council. If the council has required as part of their approval process a wall or a fence, only the council can amend or change that. So that's what it's difficult for anybody to understand. But once there's been a policy change, then from that point on, then obviously you follow the new set of rules. And it might seem like it's not fair, so to speak, or equitable, but it really is, because everybody was uniformly treated under the old rule, but now the new rule, everybody's being uniformly and equitably treated under the new rule. And the new rule is council requires a wall, then only the council can undo it. So, but obviously on something like this, the more guidance that you want to give as a planning commission for whatever your recommendation is, the more helpful it is for the council. So,
all right, thank you. Commissioner?
Is parcel A still going to be developed with a commercial office building there?
Yes, it's still in zone now.
Okay. And there, if I remember correctly, I walked this, I should probably know this better. It's just chain link fence around the schoolyard, isn't it, around the kindergarten area?
Correct. That's what they put around schools.
Yeah.
And you normally don't see masonry walls next to schools unless it's adjacent to a road.
That's what I'm just checking on. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and open this up for public comment. And the first name I've got is Ron Drake. Again, you'll have 3 minutes. Okay. Can you turn the mic on?
Right button.
Right button.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
State your name, please.
my name is Jeanette Drake. I live at 1856 West Drake Lane on the Drake family farms, and we own the property that's right next to this development. Our grandson, Caleb Drake, lives there. And, I guess from what you said before, our property is zoned residential, but it's being used as agricultural. And there is a ditch that's right along that fence line. And in February, I wrote a letter to the city council and to Mayor Burton because of all the different problems that we've had since this whole thing was approved in 2017. And I brought copies for all of you. You can read them. And we've been through a lot of hardships. I think you need to consider us as agricultural. The letter, there were 3 things that we wanted to have communication about, and with the city and with the developer. One was a stamped concrete wall. 2 was a possible retaining wall because of the level of the ground was raised on the development, and then access to our irrigation water because they piped in the ditch. So we're not able to put our pump in and irrigate the water. And then also removing the curbs across the driveway in Drake Lane. My husband's going to talk about that. So when Joshua Shipp spoke with us, he was really good about not making any promises on behalf of his company. So you can be proud of him for that. And he said that they would not pay for an irrigation box. So our son has bought an irrigation box that still needs to be installed. But I think we definitely need to have a wall. I think Mr. Schiff said that they didn't have any plans to put in a wall on the west side between our property, that it was just going to be along the that last lot, number 14. I guess I'll, 3 minutes isn't long enough. When I was in, we don't care about whether the apartments has a concrete wall or not, but we definitely need a wall that's for safety reasons. If we're going to have an irrigation box there, that is different than not having a wall at all. And I think we're shareholders. We're using the land for agricultural. We're shareholders in the South Jordan Canal Company. We need access to our irrigation water. Okay, so anyway, when I was in high school, I enjoyed studying Robert Frost, the poet. And one poem that I liked was called Mending Wall, where two neighbors repair their New England stone wall. And one of the themes of the poem was, good fences make good neighbors. And I think the people that are going to live there and us can be better neighbors if we have a good wall.
Your time is up, ma'am. Sorry.
I guess I've introduced ourselves. So
If you want, you can.
We granted a right of way. Is my time's up?
Your time's up.
Okay. Anyway, I just say we were really.
If you would like, you can go ahead and speak.
We were.
So.
I'll just say we were really stupid when we granted them a right of way for emergency turnaround. We didn't get paid anything for that, and we're just not happy with it.
Okay, Mr. Drake, you're up.
I guess what it kind of boils down to as far as the wall, not all people have a high tolerance for farmland and farm smells and farm dust and dirt and stuff like that. So I think that we need to have a concrete wall. If you look at the concrete walls that are surrounding most of the new subdivisions that are coming in, they're really good looking. And we've got homes on there that'll be facing that wall. And I really believe that it needs to be concrete, more so than just an old white vinyl fence for the aesthetics of the place. We also have, like Jeanette mentioned, we've had problems with this development all the way down the line. But I guess we wanted to mention there's a curb. When they put the curb in the road in, they put the curb across our lane, and across. We have a home there right next to it, and the curb is there. And so that's when they poured the curb, and then they put in the asphalt. So we had to put dirt over there so people could get over the curb to get into our farm. When the first contractor that we talked with, he was going to help us get a bid when they put in the concrete, so we could extend that concrete up to our store and our parking lot in the store. Well, that didn't happen, and all of a sudden we had a curb there blocking the road and also the concrete or the asphalt there. So what I'm mentioning, maybe it doesn't apply right now, but there's 2 new homes that are being built right now currently. And when they cut out for those 2 homes, we want them to cut out that curb that's blocking our lane and the home there on the side. So that needs to be done. let's see, and there we go. Oh, and then all of a sudden it seemed like every other month we had a new contractor. So it's been really something.
Okay, sir, your time's up.
Okay. Anyway,
Thank
we
you.
need a concrete wall.
Okay, thank you. Next is Dan Drake.
There's a Dan Drake on the phone. Yeah.
Is he on Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Dan, can you hear us?
Can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Dan Drake. I'm the son of Ron and Jeanette Drake, and I'm the younger generation that is buying out the siblings of my father to continue the property as a farm. And so the house that is on the west side that I wanted to correct a couple things. Number one, when Mr. Ship said there was no wall, there was a fence. There was a very old fence that had grapes on it and other plants on it. And one day we just came home and it was gone. And they ripped it out without talking with us, without speaking with us. And then the house that I own with my father is now just exposed to whatever. And that is not the way to run a development. I wish that we had a contractor that cared, but these contractors don't care. And so now you have an opportunity to allow them to further. They've promised so many things that they did not fulfill. It's one of the most haphazard and poorly planned and disastrously executed developments that's dragged on forever with no resolution. And they made a lot of empty promises to my parents. They granted them access and right of ways. And like my father said, there's a square curb over their driveway. My 80-year-old dad has to drive over a square curb to get home to his house. He had to pile dirt over it in order to drive up over it. And that's acceptable to this contractor? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And my other home that we own there that Caleb lives in, same thing. We had to pile dirt like we're a bunch of hillbillies on our street so that you could drive into your driveway. And that's acceptable. And that's what they want to continue doing, and not put the wall and not block the access to the waterway, which kids are going to get in the irrigation ditch and drown. So of course you need a waterway. And as far as the vinyl fence goes, Pearsons, who used to own the property, one of the reasons they cited to me for moving was because children kept climbing over that vinyl fence into their yard and they were sick of it. So perhaps you do need a concrete wall that's large enough to deter the children from climbing over it and disturbing all the old retired people that are going to have those homes. Should have never agreed to any of this. They promised us that we would get provided sewer to the homes there. We would get provided city water with a new pipeline. We would have a paved lane and we would have had a fence. And now the only thing that was in writing was the fence. And now they want to take that away. So please do not do that. And please don't let them build the wall on top of the ditch, because it will just cave in. So we need to have some sort of planning about where to put the wall, because on the property line is the ditch. And knowing this, how this development has gone, they'll just do something ridiculous like put the fence
Okay,
all over the ditch.
Your time is up. Thank you. Okay, anybody else here wishing to speak on this item, please step forward. You'll be given 3 minutes. Is there anybody else on Zoom?
Not with their hand raised.
Okay, we'll go ahead and bring this back to the commission.
Can I say something, Chair?
Yes.
So the perceived wrongs or the real wrongs you've heard tonight by the developer is not this applicant. He purchased it from the developer, the previous developer. And so if you were thinking of punitive because of this developer, this was not the developer that caused the issues for the Drake family. So
Thank you. I've just got one quick comment, and then I think that what the city council had approved prior should be honored, because it was already gone through the motions and stuff. Obviously, we've heard some comments from the Drake family and from the new developer. In my mind, though, since we've already got that approved, that we should honor that. Even the new developer, he should honor whatever was already existing at the time he purchased that property and those contracts. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and go ahead.
Sorry, I think Commissioner Shelton knows she was going to say something. He was hovering over the button. So I'm with you. There's not a whole lot here that I think we as a planning commission can do other than just follow the rules. And I'm with you that we should forward this and let city council do with it as they will. However, because we've been presented with this and asked for us to provide our input, here's my thoughts. I think that our developer would go a long way to work well with the Drakes and figure out what is going to be a good solution for them. Does that mean let's put a masonry fence in between their property and the development? Yes. Does that mean let's find a place that doesn't go over their ditch? Yes, let's do that. Right? I don't think we need to worry about putting a masonry wall in between the apartments and the new lots. If children continue to climb over that, then the new homeowners can deal with that with the apartment complex, right? As far as putting, it looks like we've got masonry wall decided around parcel A that's going to protect it from the school. There's already a fence there. Again, what good is a masonry wall versus a 6-foot chain link fence going to do? I don't know. City council can do what they want. I feel as a strong recommendation to our developer that he work with the Drakes to figure out a solution that helps them feel a little bit better about the things that again, as Mr. Garner said, not your fault. Understand that, sir. But it would go a long way as far as goodwill goes to work with the property owners who are being most affected by this.
Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you. So with all of this discussion, I have a question for staff as far as on the west side where it shows the green, where the green ends, and you can see the Gordon and Emily Crane home. Drake. Wow. Get my glasses out. The irrigation canal is right along there. And so the comment that was made about if you put a fence up there, then you've got issues with the fence collapsing. But if we don't put a fence up there, then we have issues with kids playing in the irrigation. So could you address is there anything planned for that little section there? Where it's not green, just on the farthest west portion?
They were correct earlier. I believe one of the Drakes mentioned the wall is only planned for around lot 7, 8, 14, and 15 on that end. So where lot 14 ends at the street at Pearson Park Court, the wall would end.
And is that where the irrigation water is?
I would need, maybe the Drakes can answer that.
Okay. Okay, so my request for city council would be to just address the issue with the irrigation water. I mean, I think this is in their court as far as final approval or disapproval, but I do believe that irrigation water needs to be looked at and safety factors.
So I think that the ditch is piped from Drake Lane to the north property line of Parker Place. So that should be a safety issue, but it still is, as the Drakes have mentioned, they need to put a box in that they have purchased so they can access water out of that. So a box is different than an open ditch. So the pipe should provide the protection.
Thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
So it's covered now. I think the big issue is we make sure that we have a fence that's not going to collapse into it, right?
Yes,
that's what
correct.
we're looking at.
Yes.
So
You want to suspend get a motion?
I'll just say this. So we're just making a recommendation tonight, Mrs. Drake. I think that it'd be better to come back and make that comment specifically to city council. Sure, and I appreciate that, but just to keep in mind, as far as the recommendation goes tonight, I don't see any reason why we're going to vary from what staff has recommended, simply because there's not any authority in our body to do so. You'd be better off making that point when you come back to city council.
And I
Okay.
think that'll go a long ways if you mention that to the city council when they have their hearing. So do I have a? Okay.
I'll do it.
Okay.
I move that the planning commission recommend to the city council denial of the amended development plan for the cottages at Parker Place, located at 7398 South Redwood Road.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the denial? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it carries 6. Nothing. Okay. Next item on the agenda will be, looks like a motion to continue that the Sienna Hills 2. Does somebody want to make a motion to continue this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I was thinking that I could click on it. Do we have a motion date on this? Okay. I move that we continue item number 4 to a date uncertain.
I'll second.
And Commissioner Allen seconded. All in favor?
Before we vote,
Oh.
was this covered at the last meeting that I missed?
No.
Oh, second.
New item, but we don't have any information, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-0. Okay, next on the agenda is item 5, Bowman's Arrow, 6170 West, 7800 South, future land use map amendment for 75.66 acres from low density residential, medium density residential, high density residential, community commercial, future park and parks and open land to medium density residential, high density residential, and very high density residential and parks and open land. ARB Investments is the applicant, Robert Bowman. Oh, okay. Come up and you know the drill.
Oh, I don't know. There we go. Fantastic. Ben Southworth, West Jordan. It's a pleasure to be here and to be here with all of you and to talk about this item here and to introduce this application. It's kind of fun. I look at this one and it's a FLUM. What a cool acronym. It's kind of fun to say. It's like it should be in a Disney show or something, like Flubber or something. But FLUM, Future Land Use Map Change, Amendment to the General Plan is what we're talking about today. I don't have any fun pictures for you because this is a pretty straightforward sort of deal here. But I would like to start and talk about what we're not talking about today. We're not talking about a zone change. Nothing to do with that. We're not talking about a development plan. Not at all. What we're talking about is specifically to the general plan and an update of the future land use map. I would say that the staff report is very thorough. I think it's pretty airtight in what they did, and you guys are really bound by some pretty strict guidelines. What you do is very limited, and I think they've done a good job of putting that within those bounds so you can really look at that. And it meets the vision of what the city council has, what's in our city code. We've been very particular that as we went through this to make sure that we meet that. We don't want no exception or any of that. We wanted this to be right on with the code. And so we're very particular to do that because, quite frankly, it's just a lot easier to do it that way. If you just follow the rules and meet the guidance that the vision of the city, then that's what we wanted to do. So if you look at this piece, and it is, if we go, let's step back just a little bit, some history about this. This was part of a greater piece that was connected with Copper Rim. Many of you probably know that. And then Mountain View came through and just took a knife right through the middle of it, cut it in half, and kind of changed a lot of what had been planned out on the west side. So in the future land use map, if you go back, this piece of property, history-wise, really hasn't changed for probably 20 years. The landowner at the time wasn't involved with that. It was, in fact, this piece of property has been in his family for over 100 years. This goes back, predates any of us. At least I know it predates me in this city because I'm not even that old. So this really has a lot of history here. But if you go back about those 20 years, when this was drawn out and we did the West Side planning area. I don't know if anybody remembers any of that. Some heads nodding over here. Scott remembers all that fun. Yeah, that was back in the day when we really attacked what's going on in the West Side. And I say we. I've been in this city for 25 years, lived here, I'm a resident still. I live pretty close to this. Served on the city council for 8 years, a couple terms as an elected official. So I have a lot of history and understand a little bit about what has happened here and what hasn't happened here. So wasn't involved in initially setting this. Come back into 2012, I think was the next update. Scott, does that sound about right? And Mountain View's coming through, and there's a lawsuit with the landowner and UDOT trying to figure it out. So he's precluded from participating in any way, and so the property really stays stagnant from that point there. And so we really have a situation where you have a piece of property that hasn't been updated, even though the general plan calls for updates to the future land use map. And there's a couple other places in the city you guys are probably well aware of. This has happened as well. And so it needs to happen. So today is really bringing this up to what is going on now. What are the policies? What is the direction of the city today? What has changed in this area that would justify or mean that this would make sense to have an update to the future land use map? Mountain View is one big giant piece going through there. That is so significant and not something that to underlook. Right now, we are only talking about the FLUM, the future land use map. We're not talking about zoning. We're not talking about a development plan, but one day that'll probably happen when infrastructure is ready. Right now, there's just no infrastructure, so it can't take place. There's no water. Even if we wanted to do this, couldn't. So what do? We come back to this and we say, all right, let's help correct some issues that are wrong. Let's give the city, let's give the school district, let's give UDOT, everybody that plans, the ability to plan properly for the future. So IOZ is probably the route that would take place. It'd be a planned community. IOZ says, if you remember, when this came through, the impetus there was, this is our big chance. We've never had a freeway in West Jordan. And we're getting tired of sending our tax dollars, our sales tax dollars off to Sandy and Draper and Murray because they've got the car lots, right? So that's where a lot of that leakage takes place. And there are all a whole host of reasons. And so IOZ looks at it and says, okay, how do we be strategic about where we're going to put our development? In the past, it's kind of been, and I could generalize and probably pretty close to say, okay, you got a piece of property, you can go through the process. What typically happens is, all right, property owner, we're going to dole out a little bit of commercial to you, and here's a little bit of housing, and you might get a little part here, and a piece of this, a piece of that. And we spread those all over the place. What happens specifically, say, in commercial is we start to put these commercial pieces, and they're all over the place. And what do all these little teeny pieces that are not regional draws do? They start to cannibalize each other. They start to become a drain on each other. So much so if you look at, no, and I bring this up because a piece of this, there's a teeny piece of, not a teeny piece, but there's a piece, you can see what that is. A little bit of commercial that we would change from there. So why does that make sense for IOZ to say, hey, we really don't want commercial there? Well, IOZ says, let's be strategic and get every bit of value for our community out of this freeway. So over in this corner here, in this intersection, we're going to designate this as where we want a certain type of commercial. And maybe it might be a different on this one. And this one happens to be the IOZ says, we would really like to have the housing component of this whole plan here. And so that's why you don't see that piece of commercial. Across the street to the east, there are 200 plus acres in the Copper Rim area, if you look at Smith's and all of that stuff, that are still not, total commercial there. So it's hard to compete with that. Down the street, you have their strip mall type commercial, which we typically, that's the typical mentality we have. You get the piece of, here's your little allotment. 15, 20 years I've been living in that area for 25. for 15, 20 years, there's pieces that are still not developed. And so we do a little bit much. And so that was I think the genius and the smarts that behind IOZ is to say, let's be strategic. And so that's what we're doing here. This is a future land use map change to say, let's be strategic to the future, because right now the infrastructure doesn't exist to do what needs to take place. There are concerns. I've heard from residents, you've heard from residents, there's concerns with things like traffic. So, whoa, we can't do this because the traffic's gonna be. You're right. I've tried to drive through this place in any time of day. And it's ridiculous. But this change won't have any impact on traffic in any time soon. The city is addressing some of those. Now, there are issues we're going to have to work with UDOT. The city's going to have to work with UDOT on the intersection outside of our control here. So another piece of this, and again, probably getting off base from where you guys really have to look, because your specific set of requirements within the general plan that you have to base these on. But I just want to say, where does density belong in our community? And we listened when we did this. We've listened to the community. We've looked at the laws code that's on the books, and we said, okay, this is where it should be. When I was on a city councilman all the time, it was a really difficult conversation to have with development to come in and say, oh, we got this neighborhood here. It'd be great to throw this higher density. And but that's not where it belongs. It belongs in the confluence of these transportation hubs. Here, you have a freeway coming through. You have a massive collector in 78, or arterial with 78 that's coming through that's even going to get larger. This is where we have a housing problem here in Utah. And if we need to help to solve that, to provide opportunities. My kids had to move out of this. My son that just got married had to leave. There was nowhere there's places, but if I want him close by, if we want to be able to move to places and have them, we need to have these kind of opportunities. And so it does address that. And that is a policy I know that I've heard from you guys, from the city council. It is in our code. And that's why I say this aligns very well with that. The findings, as we read through, I think are thorough, they're spot on, and they're pretty airtight. There are fears anytime you see density, and I get that. I had the same reaction. I'm sure all of you have the same reaction. But if you think about where it should be, if you think about the strategic direction of the city, of this freeway, and using it to benefit our city to the best and to the most, this is, we think, is what makes the most sense for our community going forward. So with that, I'll turn that back over to you.
Thank you. Can you turn the mic off for me too? Thank you.
Lots of questions.
Oh, sorry. There's questions for you.
I want to skip out of questions. That's the best part.
Okay, so for those in the room who are looking at this thinking, why is this going to happen? You've done a good job, I think, of explaining why it needs to happen. What I want you to take a minute to do is explain why this needs to happen now. If there's no infrastructure, if there's no water, if there's no roads to support this, there's no mass transit running along 700 South, there's absolutely nothing out there right now to support this. Why do we need to do this now, as opposed to waiting until we actually have a plan coming down the road, with a master development plan, with an actual, site plan? We've got developments, improvements taken care of. Why are we doing this now instead of later?
That is a fantastic question that really cuts to the heart of why I'm even here talking to you today, because we tried the opposite. We had said, let's go through all three steps. And because this piece of property hasn't been abated, it is an issue. It is a problem moving forward in the city. And there are other places too that you quite frankly need to address. The infrastructure doesn't exist. It couldn't be prepared for because nobody knows. UTA can't prepare for bus lines coming out because in this instance and others, they don't know. School district can't prepare for the amount of schools because they don't know. That's the whole point of the future land use map, is to prepare for the future. The general plan is looking forward. It's policy guidance. It's Vision. Vision is a big part of that, and especially the future land use map. If you get the FLUM incorrect, some of those consequences of that are, again, infrastructure doesn't meet what the needs of a growing community that always changes. It would be really, really awesome if my aunt and uncle who lived here for probably 40 years, maybe 45 years, if they would have written a plan, and that would have been just great forever. You know, it never changes, but that's not the reality. We know that. It does change. And so it's good to have this. Now, the other side of that too is, and for development, once you do this and you get this on the future land use map, that triggers some other effects too. You have to take that now into your impact fees. And impact fees, what are they going to have to do? Because the development's got to pay its way. We get that, and we should. That doesn't absolve us from impacts we're going to have on transportation. 6400 West, it's going to have to be widened. It's a half road now. If this ever gets to the point, when it gets to the point where it'll be developed, that's got to be fixed. 7800 is going to have the cities coming through in the next, I'd say, year or two. I think it's planned and funded to widen 78. Again, that doesn't address, and I get it, it doesn't address what UDOT needs to do with that intersection. But UDOT's got to get on the ball here. We've got to, as a city, as a community, we need them as well. So anyway, what I'm saying is it also impacts those fees, and those fees will have to increase for development. And this should have taken place years ago, because all of these years, our community could have been collecting higher fees to help pay for the infrastructure we need for the future of our city. Matt, does that, or Commissioner Quidney, sorry, does that cut to the heart of what you were asking?
It does. I'm hoping to just kind of help paint a picture here. So the other side of this, you talked about the cannibalization of these small community commercial places. I think an example of what you're talking about is this orphaned lot on 90th South and 4800 West that we talked about earlier, that we're all hoping will be a commercial spot at some point, but it's not ever going to happen. So if we leave these little spots as commercial, I'm on the record, I've been in this commission for 8 years. I've been a big proponent of on these arteries, we just have commercial, right? But you're kind of illustrating and painting the picture here now that these places can get orphaned, and then we just leave these lots out here, and then we get this other weird non-conforming project that kind of maybe comes in. So thank you for your explanation.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Hatch.
Thank you. Matt stole my question. I want you to know that. I was going to ask, why are you doing this? I guess I'm a bit baffled. I would think you would go to the general plan committee, and I appreciate you doing all this work in the behalf of West Jordan to create higher impact fees. But as you mentioned, there are places all over our city that we need to go in and update. So kind service, but I just don't see the need to do this before we know what we're doing this for. So
right.
That's my comment. Thank you.
Right. And I don't know if there's a question there, if I could.
Not really.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Ben, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's hear from staff.
All right,
Mark.
thank you. So I'm just going to comment on a few extra things kind of in a little more detail. So just looking at the current land use map here, as you can kind of see here, this is kind of a hodgepodge mix of the pink is the commercial on the corner, and then kind of as you move to the north, it kind of starts at the higher density and moves lower as you get closer to the neighborhood there. But we calculated the density range. So the general plan actually has a density range that it recommends for these specific land uses. And basically right now with the current land use map, we're at a range of 142 to 284 dwelling units. So just a little bit for perspective there. And this is probably pretty obvious, but basically the idea with this proposal was to kind of have the higher density closer to the highway, and just kind of follow that same similar pattern where it's,
you're basically decreasing the density as you get closer to the neighborhood. Also, I should point out that this plan would remove, if we compare it to the current future land use map, we'd be removing two areas for a future park. That's the dark green there on the map. So basically, we would sometime in the future need to look at our parks and open lands master plan that was just recently done in 2019 and just kind of reassess some of those levels of service. Now the park that's going in at the Maple Hills, it's currently under construction right now. That was not really included in the level of service study. So that's one area that could be reassessed. So density, as far as this proposal goes, we don't really know for sure, but we did kind of have a little bit of an estimate. At the bare minimum, we'd probably be looking at about 600 units on up. So the very high density residential designation in the general plan that calls for 10.1 dwelling units per acre and up. So there's not really a set level. A lot of that would be negotiated with the city council and the city based on infrastructure and things like that. So that would happen during the rezone process. So going into the details on the infrastructure, the water infrastructure, right now we don't have enough to support this, as Mr. Southworth said. Basically, there is some infrastructure plan in the coming years, but as to how much that's going to support this is kind of unknown at that point. So any deficit in serviceability would need to be addressed at the rezone and the master plan level. Same with the sewer infrastructure. Basically, we're looking at to service this amount of density, we need some pretty significant upgrades to the sewer, particularly from Mountain View Corridor all the way out to Airport Road. So that's another area that would need some improvements. Also, we've got some master plan roads in this area. You can kind of see here in the blue, there's 6400 South is already in place, but that's planned for a collector road. So any future development would need to put those improvements in place and widen the road. Again, at the master development review. There's also 7400 South, which is planned to go over, as you can see, through the property and over the Mountain View corridor. Basically, UDOT has agreed to build a bridge over the Mountain View corridor if the city can connect those two roads up. So Verdigris Drive on the east side, that's already been connected and is in place. So this one on the west side is kind of the missing piece there. But anyway, that's pretty much it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for staff? Okay, we'll open this up for the public hearing. June, if you'd come up and you have. Okay.
Where's the switch?
It's on, so you're good to go.
Okay. Everybody else had to turn it on. I have some serious concerns about shifting the densities to here. We can't really talk to what it will do to the traffic, but we know that undoubtedly it will increase the traffic. It's an unknown as to what will happen with put the roundabout in on the corner of 64 and 78. Opening those roads to the north may or may not alleviate some of the traffic. The corridor creates a problem, and I'm not sure that that's solvable. I can't even foresee that. But to shift this to high density and very high density, I'm super concerned with, because that opens the door for a big box apartment complex like we've seen all the way down the corridor, with the excuse that this busy road nobody wants to build a house on. The zoning or the future use map, the way it's laid out right now, gives a lot of possibility for a nice community, a planned community that has a variety of things built into it, nice amenities that will blend into the existing subdivisions that are already in place. To make that change to the high density this far ahead I think it's misleading. I think we need to take a really good look at this. Now, I've lived out here for 27 years on the property since 91 that I live on, and I've watched, been to many zoning planning city council meetings across time, and over the density requests of developers to shift to the higher and higher densities from one place to another has whittled away at probably some of the what would make West Jordan a little more like South Jordan. And I don't see why we have to bear the brunt of affordable housing. Yeah, we need a nice mix of a lot of different kinds of communities, and to turn this corner of an already busy place into the potential of an ugly big box apartment complex, that's really awful. Now you talk about the schools. It doesn't matter what they do here. It's going to cause a transient nature to the schools if apartments come in, and that would be the logical thing to do on a high density kind of plan. I'm a school teacher, been in West Valley, taught a lot of years, transient areas, and the schools suffer in a major way when you have constant shuffle in and out of students. We want to have good schools in West Jordan. The more apartments we put in, the less that will be. And that's just a given fact. So we need to be really cautious about okaying this density change at the moment, because I don't think it's a wise move for this area, for West Jordan in general. And I am strongly against the change of density. Later out, when it comes to a plan and somebody really has something in mind, maybe it can be revisited at that point. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Ken, Will Haight, is that Haight? Okay, Will Haight.
I must be getting old. I stiffened up sitting there. Well, we moved to this area. My name is Ken Wilhite, and I live right off of 7800 South and 6400 West, right near where that parcel of land is. And I travel on 7800 daily, so I've watched it become more and more congested over the past 6.5 years. You might say I'm part of the problem because I moved there 6.5 years ago and the community was growing. But the street, 7800 is clearly over capacity. But if UDOT comes through and improves it, which I gather from the conversation it's in the plan, there's still a limit to how many lanes you can put on 7800. And I'm troubled by the percentage of very high density that's in the plan that I see up there. I understand the need to know what the transportation corridor will serve in the future, but nobody has given a reason why there should be that much very high density, which is defined as being 4 or more story buildings in that particular area. That is going to dump a huge amount of traffic into the area. And also on the agenda, it says that there's supposed to be parks and open land in that area. I see no parks and open land on that plan up there. So I would just object to the increase in density, and I see no reason for it, and I've heard no reason for it. So with that, I think I'll close. I think it's a bad idea.
Thank you, sir. Do we have anybody on Zoom that's got their hand raised?
Yes. L Banks.
Elm Banks, can you
L,
hear?
maybe L Banks. I'm not sure.
Oh, L Banks, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My husband and I live in West Jordan. I'm a longtime resident of West Jordan. We are. And we moved out here and we moved west. We lived on about, well, it doesn't matter. We just moved further west. We
Ma'am,
are
can we
probably
just get
part
your
of-
name real quick?
Yeah, Lisa Banks.
Okay, thank you.
So we moved out here and I'm having a struggle with the driving on 78th. I'm worried about water and we're doing a great job. I think that the city's doing a great job of putting nice communities in that. I listened to the first speaker that when we have an area to have it have lots of different kind of housing, that's great. But to have high density housing when we can't even get down 78th now is a problem. We also have a lot of apartments already right in that area. So to add some more high density housing is a problem. I really like the idea of commercial along there, along with the low density, medium density, and high density housing. And I listened to the first person talk about schools. I'm also a school teacher. And I think that that is a huge problem to have that dense of an area in there. So I listened to the first two people and I think they did a great job. I just want to reiterate how unhappy I would be about that area being very high density housing.
Thank you, Ms. Banks.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and open it up for
My name is Matthew Smith. I live at 6676 Brook Maple Way. And I would like to ask the Planning Commission to recommend to give a negative recommendation of this to the City Council. I sent an email arguing all the findings to you earlier today, but I wanted to focus on 3 of them. I believe finding E is unmet, as the city staff said, the infrastructure is inadequate to make this map change, especially with water and sewer. And additionally with roads, the way that this land is laid out, it's a triangle. So everybody coming into and out of this neighborhood has to go on 7800 South. Even when the bridge happens over the top, you're just going to go into another neighborhood for another half mile or a mile before you can get anywhere. So all the traffic's going to be coming out there. I know that there's plans to widen it to 2 lanes in each direction, but probably not 3 the last I talked to UDOT. Also, the estimated units were 600, but based on the numbers, it could go up to 15 or 1800 units in this area. And I only count around 900 and all the rest of the Maples, Maple Hills, Terrace Hills, all that neighborhood. So we're going to triple the number of people in this area just with this change. And that would triple traffic, and we're not ready for that. Also, finding F is not met because of a few things. One, we talked about the interchange overlay zone. On the city's website, it says that that zone is meant to be a mix, and that's what the city wants there. And by going from what we had before, which was a mix, to this, which is higher density, that's not a mix. And so it goes against that. It also goes against the cap and grade ordinance. And I don't think we can have a discussion about putting very high density on the map without a discussion of the cap and grade ordinance. I worry also that there's no upper limit to this very high density. It's 10 units per acre and up. So I don't know how big it's going to get. And then my last point is that taking away that commercial is detrimental to everybody on the west side of Mountain View. There's only one piece of commercial property there that has anything on it right now. It's a gas station. That's all we have. We have to cross Mountain View to get to anything else. And sometimes it's easier to get on Mountain View, go to South Jordan and do our shopping and dining there. It would be great. That corner is prime real estate. I'm sure we could get somebody to come in there and do that. So I just want to say that I think we should send a negative recommendation to the City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carly Lewis. I live in just that area.
I'd like to echo what he said about the commercial. I think taking that away, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't that take revenue away from our city, which will then help fund the need and staff we need to take care of the parks that are there? There was already in a previous meeting where they about how they don't have enough staff, they don't have enough for Parks and Rec to actually take care of the current parks that we have. So why would we want to take away commercial that could potentially help bring in that revenue with taxes and such to help take care of? Because I mean, Parks and Rec are great. I have 3 children of my own, and they love that. But if we can't take care of it, what's the point of having the Parks and Rec? And what June said, June was very made very sense. Like, let's have a mixture of that area. Why do we need to go from what we had to this not even high density, but this very high density? And the fact that it's being planned before anything else is done with traffic, that's obviously you've heard numerous times. But the original plan of having that commercial, again, like you said, like sometimes it is easier to go over to South Jordan to that area over there. Why wouldn't we want to bring more people here to West Jordan to provide for the residents in this area? And those that live here not only get to live here, work here, but they can enjoy and shop here. And I've only been in this area for 6 years, but we're not going anywhere, and I want to stay here. But that means that improvement, there does need that improvement, and there's doing some. They're adding a little, but let's not take away what was already had. And I know you mentioned you have tons of emails that you've gotten in. And so what I'm saying is probably not new, but I did want to really talk about that commercial. Again, there's pros and cons to commercial because that can bring in certain things, negative things, but there's not room for that very high density. It just doesn't make sense. And I, again, echo June and everyone for the most part. So just taking consideration that putting that there and to say, oh, let's put that there, but not solve the other problems. How does that help West Jordan and the community? So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Looney. I live at 6432 West Haven Maple. I think the most tragic part of this whole thing would be the children. I think our education system is not set up for it now. And I know, this is a future program. So, would we work with that? We already have some of the most populous schools in the entire state. And so trying to support that, we haven't done, as the city of West Jordan, I'm certainly not putting the onus on anybody here, but we haven't done a good enough job of supporting our children now. And they're the future leaders of this city, of our country, and we don't support them very well. The numbers don't show, testing numbers and everything, they just don't show the support, and we don't give them that we need. And I think that's because of the amount of students we have. So to just influx that with additional students, I just think it's a horrible idea, and I think our education would suffer more than it is suffering now.
Thank you.
I'm Randy Hoffman. Actually live in the neighborhood just on the other side of 78th from there. I actually used to live immediately across the street from that 48th and 90th development. Totally agree. Commercial does not make sense there. And I used to walk to that track station almost every single day. So it's kind of fun to see that on there. But I think one of the things that hasn't been said that I think is important to note here is just considering the sense of community. I look at that neighborhood, I look at the potential of that much high density, potentially, 4-story apartment buildings, a whole slew of them. And then, high density, I assume that's 3-story apartment buildings. I don't know. There's nothing there to anchor that community. I mean, you maybe have a strip of these single family homes. Who would want to live there? I mean, would anybody here who's currently living in a single family home, would you want to live in that kind of a little strip there, completely surrounded by high density homes? Like, no. And so those homes are going to be transient, those apartments are going to be transient, and there's not going to be any sense of continuity or community in that area. And so that's to me is one of the biggest reasons why I think this would be a bad idea. But also to re-echo the point that Carly made, you know, we need additional funding to be able to take care of some of those parks. I mean, immediately across 78th from there, you can see that slightly open rectangle, a smaller one there. That's like we call it the Bach Park. I was there today with my kids. That grass is garbage. It is horribly it's horribly maintained. And the weeds seem to be a little bit more under control now. I don't know, but and I mean it's only a couple of years old, but one of the slides is already warped enough that my toddler catches air every single time on that bump. I literally stand at the slide and slow him down on that bump every time. So we do need those additional funds to help take care of some of these parks. Personally, I sometimes worry about the idea of not in my backyard, because there is a need for high density. There is a need for medium density. And as has been noted, there was a mix there. Maybe the mix could be adjusted, but this feels like it's just completely taken, you know, a decent mixture and completely thrown it out the window to go for something that's just really extreme. So that's all.
My name is Tina Smith. I live in the Maples, just adjacent to this piece of property, and just wanted to touch on a couple of things. You know, everybody kind of feels the same from our community. You can kind of tell we're all struggling. In fact, it was very hard for us when we got notification that this was happening, because we just got notification last week in spring break, and so a lot of people couldn't be here tonight. But we wanted to make sure that our voices were heard and that you understood that this is a big deal for us. We are not happy about this at all. To give you a better understanding of what we're looking at here, if you look at that map and you look at this very high density that they are proposing, and you look south and you see that very high density little strip that's going off the edge of the map, that is a development that is still in the midst of being completed. And it is very much what we see that they are talking about for this area. In fact, it was mentioned by staff in this report. And that not finished yet development, when it's finished next year, we'll have over 300 units. And already the impact from a partially developed development right there has just taken our traffic issues to the max in that area. And that is only 300 units. If you look at the size of that and you put it into what is being proposed, that is over 3 times the size that is being offered. They talked about the lowest amount being 600. We're looking more, you know, obviously something up 1,500 units or more being put in this area. And there is no coming out of that except on 7800 South. Mountain View Corridor may be there, but anything that gets onto Mountain View Corridor has to hit 7800 South within a very short amount of span of road. And so this is going to impact us in big ways, no matter how wide we make that road. It is going to make a huge impact to pull out that many cars in that area. Also, what's not shown on that map, I appreciated Commissioner Allen mentioning earlier in the meeting. The west side is being given a huge load to hold with all this high density that is trying to spread out density from the rest of the city. Our area right here, the 7800 South, within 1 mile, starting just off the side of the map and heading this way, we have 4 large apartment complexes in the very high density amount. Those all feed into 7800 South. We have 4 of them already, and now we're talking about putting something that size. It's just unrealistic to consider this. It has been talked about how this is really not a zone change. This is a formality. This is not a formality. This is what happens so that zone change becomes a formality. Once this map is changed, the formality is saying, now it's time to change the zoning. And this is a big deal. This is why we are here tonight and we are fighting this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brandon online.
Brandon, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, just speak your name and go ahead.
Okay. My name is Brandon Bauman, and I also live there in the community. I'm on Mesa Maple Drive. I work from home every day, and if I have to go anywhere in the morning or late afternoon or evening, it can take, a bare minimum of 10 to 15 minutes just to get through the intersection there at Mountain View. In between that and the roundabout by Smith's, it increases the time that it takes to do a simple grocery store run. I would love to see some commercial development on our side, as I believe Matt Smith mentioned. I think we badly need that. To make a little joke, I don't want to see any more coffee shops or tire stores. I feel like we have enough of that now in our area. But I definitely would like to see some additional options, some sit-down restaurants and some other stores and things like that where we could do our shopping. Developments like what's being proposed would push me to potentially leave West Jordan, or at least this area. I don't want to see this happen to our area. I think there's a good, better, best thing here. And what I feel is best is not to have this change to be very high residential as is being proposed. I think it would bring bad growth to our area. I think it would bring, and this hasn't been mentioned yet, but I think it would bring more crime to our area. I think there's potential for increased concerns about traffic and water usage, no matter what's done. And for long term, maybe they'll eventually fix it, but I see there being a problem for a very long time, making it an undesirable place for a lot of people here. And I don't know that it matters at all, but I actually, one of my neighbors, when I talked to him about this, mentioned that he said it was very clever to slide this proposal in on spring break, hoping to sneak it through. I don't know if there was any motivation like that at all, but it did pose the question. Anyway, I would like to propose that we reject this future land use map and stick with what it is right now, for the hopes of being able to bring more business, more money there for the city, more ability to handle the parks and things, just a nicer area to stay living and to keep raising my family here. So I agree with those who have spoken against the land use map change.
Thank you. Is there anybody else online? Nope. Okay, go ahead.
Chris Hupp, West Jordan. Full disclosure, I also represent this client. So I'm going to say that before I say anything else, because I want to make sure that everyone understands my comments and there are valid concerns. That said, there are 200 acres of commercial development. And as you guys drive over 78th, that's where I shop. I shop at Smith's. We're getting a Pizza Hut. Great. Not really great, but whatever. And the reason why we don't get sit-down restaurants is because there's not enough residents within a mile, a 3 mile, and a 5 mile radius to actually get those restaurants. That's why. Number one. Number two, as far as transportation is concerned, before I jump to that, so you'll see medium density on the west side. This land use map, or this future land use map, is actually misleading. That light yellow is medium. So medium density is up to 5 units per acre. That's what that is. It matches, and that sliver is about the same width as what's across the street on 78th, just for reference. In addition, that lighter or the darker yellow on the far side, that's high density. High density goes up to 10 units to the acre. You can't realistically or typically even build a townhome on high density. Typically, townhomes go 12 to 14 units to the acre. So for reference, you cannot, in any kind of a world, build high density or 3-story apartments on high density in West Jordan. So there's your reference as for the commercial, the reason why it hasn't filled in is because there aren't enough residents. And I know that sounds crazy. It sounds crazy to me because I live here, but there just aren't. We're just starting. We got the Cafe Rio or the Costa Vida. That's the same to me. We have finally the across the street, my favorite fast food restaurant, Panda Express. I'm happy about that. But there's like 150 vacant acres of commercial. There's no chance that that corner will fill up without residents. Just no chance. It won't happen. And so that's why residents in this area would actually make sense. In addition to that, as far as the traffic, super valid concern. But right now, UTA won't even touch us because we don't hit that 12 units to the acre threshold. So that would help with transportation. And there's other things that we could do to slip out of that. So.
Okay, anybody else like to speak?
My name is Nancy Andrew. I live in the Maples. And I have pictures here of very high density, but this doesn't mean that it can't go bigger. The traffic is already bad, and I liked what has been said tonight. Our children, I have grandchildren just down the street from me, and I've seen what they've had to do with when we first moved in there into this area. There was a school planned on some of that ground, which was taken away. If you look at the map, most of that is very high density. Most of it. We can't deal with more traffic, and our schools are at risk. And I feel the same as most of these people that have talked. So I say, please vote not to do this.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for comments. Okay.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And it really was good to hear from so many. I actually met with quite a few earlier today. We met in a park out there to have a conversation, to open that up and to hear one another and to hear their concerns. And I just echo that I understand when you see, it's scary to see very high residential on there. Just a couple comments on that. Very high density. If you look at even that map in the upper tip of the spear, if you would, you know, the reality is that piece of property being intersected by 7400 South, you can't build on that. So I wouldn't count on that being built in that regard. That would be a flyover. That has to go into a flyover bridge, and so the footprint of something like that's going to go pretty wide on that road. So anyway, that comes off of there. Doesn't make it any less scary. It still says very high density down to the low end, but you know, for what it's worth. Density in this case is pushed right up against Mountain View Corridor. Now, the economics and reality of what you could build, I think somebody mentioned in this case with IOZ, it could be anything. It could be a 12-story building. No, it can't, because you can't make that pencil. That's a reality that will restrict this to something a whole lot less, similar to what you do see around, but pushed right up against that freeway. So it acts as a barrier. It acts as a screen, if you would, a sound screen. When this is a full-fledged freeway, it will act as that as well. So why would this even be here? It had comments. Somebody said, well, look, we don't even want this. I can't understand why somebody would even want to have this. And have you ever watched the Super Bowl and an ad comes on and you're like, who in their right mind would spend $1 million or whatever it is to pick that ad right there? And the answer is, I'm a marketing guy. The answer is that ad wasn't for you. It was intended for another market, for another segment. And that's like this housing is. And somebody would say, who in their right mind would want to live by a freeway in a condo or a townhome? Would I do that? I live in a single family house. Not right now, maybe in the future, in another time. But I know plenty of people that would. And you see that because as soon as these are built all over, I work in downtown Salt Lake, and it's just booming with development. And that's real super high density. And they fill up as fast as they do. We have an immense issue in the state of Utah dealing with housing. The city of West Jordan has wisely deemed this place where they want this type of place, and this place specifically in IOZ, this is where they want their density. So that makes sense there. So we really tried to say, let's match right up against the neighborhood so that this is exactly the same as you come in from what exists west of 7400 South, and you come to that first little section, which those are exactly the same. Then you move up in your intensities all the way up against the freeway, and you push that right up against that, and that's where it is most intense. And it acts as that buffer. June mentioned, and I remember June from back in council days. I love June. June is great. She is very tenacious, and she's very passionate. I love June. Anyway, the question was, this is where density does belong. And it shouldn't be the victim of past decisions that maybe we don't think were as good. I can point to them. I can point to places in our community where density was placed that shouldn't be, but we don't say that now that we get our ducks in a row as you would, and we say we found the places where we think density should go. If we just put all of this aside and we were to draw on a pencil and we were being just clear-minded and no specifics, we'd say, yeah, let's put it near our transportation hubs. This is it. That is the reality. And I think that's why you see you have a positive recommendation, because if it meets all of those guidelines in the general plan. Traffic issues, I'm not sure how appropriate it is to try to address them in this instance. Maybe kind of zoning, but definitely in a development plan where you address those and you start to do mitigation. All right, developer, you're going to do this. Well, this is what you need to fix, but not so much at this point. For those reasons there, it just makes sense. We worked, actually, this is not our first attempt, as I mentioned. We worked with the city council members. We had meetings with them as a body. And we had positive reviews heading in direction. In fact, we had lots of, we went through different iterations of plans. Part of all of that, matching all of that, was a suggestion from your Councilman Jacob said, hey, you know what you have to do? You've got to match these. You've got to make sure that the next piece of housing that comes in, that there's this nice transition. So we did it. They said, we need you to change this. We did it. We need you to change that. We did. We went through quite a few iterations. Now we ran into a problem with the infrastructure. And so that's why we're saying, okay, we get it. We're just going to pull back. This is the next logical step, and then let the city do its thing. And then over the coming years, however long that takes, you create your infrastructure and you get it in place. And then in the future, then it will make sense. So just my key thing I want to leave with you is this: where, if we're being objective, honest and objective, we look at where density should be, it's here. If we look at the amount of commercial that was slated in there and how the excess capacity that is around it, it doesn't make sense. The park that's there, that's another piece where over time, the future land use map and what we plan for parks has changed. There used to be a massive regional park up there to the north of this piece of property. All of that has changed. That piece where that park is today does not, again, if we're being objective and we drew the map over, there absolutely guaranteed would not be a park there. Because even if we did, if we said to the city, if we said, we want that park and we want to build it, they'd say, we can't maintain it. We can't service it. And we don't want it. So what they've done, the policy has actually shifted. And they say, all right, you want to develop, you're going to do it privately, you're going to put it under an HOA, still going to have park space. And that's what would happen to have here. When you develop under the IOZ, it's, I can't remember off the top of my head the percentages, but it's a pretty high percentage of open space that has to be maintained with HOA. That's off the city's books. Private development's now paying for it. So it wouldn't be that park, but there'd still be open space. So there was a question about that. With that, I think that's about all, we really could say. It just matches exactly. We're not trying to do something that doesn't fit with what the council is, the directions we're going, and what is policy on the books. We looked at because that's the easiest way. Do what the city's asking. And that's exactly what we've done here. This is looking to the future. This is preparing, allowing everybody, all the stakeholders to prepare for the future. So if there are no other questions, sorry to be long-winded, then I will cut it off. Anything else? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, now we'll bring it back to the commission.
Right over here. So bear with me here. I've already had 2 strikes today. I don't want to make a third. This was, talk about the packet generally, with so much shifting on density and mostly on the west side. It was kind of an emotional read for me. And so I'm trying to back off on that a bit. If that comes through, that's why. All of that said, my thoughts on this particular one have shifted just a bit. And let me walk through that for just a minute. I take 7800 South every day. I think there's not a lot of job market growth, offices, those kinds of things out here. People have to move east on 7800 South to get to work, or to get typically to Redwood and then north and south, or select few can use the Mountain View corridor and head around. But 7800 South is a big street. I have watched over the course of the last 5 years my commute go up 2 to 3 minutes every year. And it's ridiculous. It takes a very, very long time for me to get anywhere. So I'm very concerned about the transportation, about the commercial, making sure that we get commercial on the west side of the Mountain View corridor. I recall as well, up until just a few years ago, 7800 South used to bifurcate right there by airport. You turned on a New Bingham, or you could potentially go westbound, but you weren't allowed to go eastbound along 7800 South. Since that's changed, 7800 South has become much more of a thoroughfare, whereas before people were moving south, getting on New Bingham. So for all of those reasons, I was walking into this just absolutely against the proposal and direction. Generally speaking, I think I still am. But what I've gained from this, and what I really would like to see, is a review of the future land use map and the master transportation map for everything to the west. If we're going to be looking at just this particular spot and saying, you know what, UDOT, look, there's a whole bunch of high density housing in this particular area, start bringing UTA in, help us, or, well, you get the idea, bring UTA in, let's look at where the commercial can happen. That needs to happen all west. That can't stop just at this parcel. So that's my thought. For that reason, at this point, I'm suggesting a negative recommendation for the change here, but a positive recommendation to look at the future land use map in total.
Anybody else?
Hey, Ammon, can you just quickly speak to the specific findings that you would argue with and to present a negative recommendation?
I would love to. I don't know if I'm going to be articulate enough to do that at this point. Also noting the size of the packet and the amount of comments and everything else that we had come through. I don't know if I'd feel, I would not be able to do justice, I think, to how I would approach that. There are a handful that were spoken of tonight. I think if I was called to the carpet on that, I would suggest pushing this off for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, and coming back.
Okay,
and I
so
could be more articulate.
You're jumping on what I was just going to say. So it doesn't seem like we have a timeline on this. We're not like, has this been noticed that it's going to city council in 2 weeks? Is this something that, because honestly, this is so big. There's so much information that even an hour before this meeting started, we were still getting comments from the citizens. I just don't feel like it's a fair decision either way for us to make a decision tonight. Like, I feel like I need to go home and read through these citizen comments. I need to go home and think about what's been said tonight. I need to go home and consider Ben's thoughts, right? Because I look at this and I'm like, where's the commercial, right? And I've had conversations with Ben, and Ben did a great job tonight. I need to decide, do I need to push for more commercial on this to protect what's there? Is it going to make sense, right? Or does Ben's argument make sense, right? I don't feel like I can make a fair decision tonight. I don't feel like it's just, I just don't think it's going to work. And I would prefer to have 2 weeks to make a decision, to talk about this a little bit more, to consider it, to drive out there. I drove past it really quickly, and I don't think I got the good scope of it. I need to just walk this a little bit and think about this a little bit more.
Are you making the motion then?
So can I ask something? If you're going to table the item tonight, are you going to reopen the public hearing?
I would suggest.
Or is
no.
it going to be the public hearing going to remain closed? Because all these people have come here, they may, so that's the only question. My recommendation is that, over the last week, we probably got, Julie, 15 emails a day, 20 saying the same thing. So, schools, traffic, water, infrastructure. So my recommendation is to not reopen the public hearing, just make the decision at the next meeting. So
That's actually, I kind of mentioned that to Jay as we walked in. I said, I feel like this is where we're going to go tonight. That tonight's the public hearing. We close it. Any other comments that would be sent through email would not be forwarded to the planning commission nor included with the packet. That in 2 weeks we would come. This would be a business item that we would have a conversation about and finish the discussion with the recommendation, whatever that recommendation might be. That just gives us time to be a little bit more informed and better prepared, I think. But I don't see any need to reopen the public hearing.
All right. Can I say one thing to the public that's here? This is only the first step. You can still make your comments to the city council because that will be another public hearing. So your comments have been heard by the planning commission. You can still make the same comments to the city council. So
yeah, into that point, thank you, Larry. I actually am very typically protective of making sure that you guys get your decision tonight. I just don't think that we can make a fair decision tonight. I don't know that it's going to be the right one. So I appreciate it when we get people to come out and visit and talk with us and share their thoughts. We don't get very many of those. This is, like I said before, this is year 8 for me. There's not 10 of these that we've had this many people come out and visit. So I do appreciate when you guys come out and respect that time, but hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from anyway.
And just as a reminder, like I said earlier, this is only the one step. Regardless of what decision is made in the future from the planning commission, it's just a recommendation to the city council. And so your voices still can be heard at that point too in city council meeting. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. So do I have any motions, or do you want me to just go ahead and? Oh,
sure.
Commissioner Wynn?
I agree that we should postpone a decision for tonight. And I also appreciate all of you who've been here to present your points of view. This is valuable input for us, and we appreciate it. I recognize and appreciate the need for a future land use map, but I don't think this is it. I think there needs to be some more work on it.
Commissioner Allen?
So I'm all up for making a motion, but maybe one more quick question is on the staffing side. If appropriate, I would appreciate a discussion in 2 weeks at the work session or pre-meeting, just going over future land use map on the west side. Whether that's a quick 5-minute, this is what it looks like currently. I'm curious in particular when it comes to Woods Ranch, Jones Ranch, some of those kinds of things. Have those already been worked in since we know generally what's going into those areas?
So right now, Mark and Ray McCandless, economic development, Duncan, a lot of people for the last year and a half have been working with the general plan committee. So that general plan update will be coming to you. And the legislature threw us some massive curveballs this year. And I mean massive curveballs. And so that's kind of slowed bringing this general plan forward to you. But you're going to have it this summer, and it's going to be a lot more than a half-hour discussion. So, and the primary discussion will be the few thousand acres that's left on the west side. You know, on the east side, you have little infill pockets and things like that, but the primary discussion will be the development on the west side. And so I think that now, if you want to talk about this 80 acres in particular at that work meeting, we can. But I mean, overall, talking about the 1,000 acres, a couple of 1,000 acres of the west side, we're not going to do it justice in a half hour. So it's going to be several meetings that we will need your input as the planning commission.
Okay.
Well, I think Emma's point is well taken, though. I think what he's saying is we want to see as much as we can around this area. This is too small of a map for me. I want to see more, especially west, if we have it available.
Agreed. And I'm primarily looking at where are those commercial centers. If it's not going to be here, where is it? And how close is it to some of these communities? That said, one more question, and this is more food for thought for me for the next 2 weeks. If we've got a general plan that's going to be coming out this summer with a whole bunch of recommendations.
I didn't say that. We're going to review it this summer.
So we're going to review this summer.
All right.
Okay. What is the purpose or what? How is it the staff has determined that this needs to come forward now and not as part of that discussion?
It's called due process under the Constitution of the United States of America. An applicant submitted an application, we took a fee, and now we have to process that application. Their application is exactly what's before you. You don't want me making decisions saying, no, I don't think you're ready to exercise your due process rights, because that's not what I believe we're about. When we get those applications, we follow state law, we follow city code, and we process them. It comes to you as that application. All of these people who are affected by it, which is wonderful, show up to the meeting and give their input. You know, this is the process. And so I don't know, Scott, am I saying that incorrectly or wrong, but that's the way we do it. You know, everyone always said a private property right. To me, private property rights are sacred in the United States of America. And whether we like it or not, people have their right to ask to use their property. And so that's the reason it's coming forward to you. Now, the rest of this discussion will be in the same meeting, but the applicant at this time will be this planning commission, because you'll be preparing this discussion. So you'll be imposing the planning commission and city council's will upon private property. Okay, but it's not because of an application. When something comes as an application, that gets preference. So
another part of that context, I'm really grateful you're wanting to look at a bigger scope. For that reason, some of you may remember several years ago, we updated our city code to meter these land use map amendments out basically quarterly. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, we got the request from the applicant, hey, I want to be on the next available planning commission. Well, we scrambled to get that packet to you because the last meeting in April happened to be the meeting that we talk about future land use map amendments. That's why you had two rough ones tonight. The next one won't be until July. Yeah. But we're following that due process. Now, the commission and the council, you have the right to properly give yourself time to review the requests. That's part of the process, right? So if you feel the need to slow things down, you do have some of that context and that right. The attorneys can get more into the details about slowing it down too slow, but I think your approach tonight is well thought out.
I think even if we just hold it until our next meeting next month, I think that gives us plenty of time to at least digest a lot of this. So.
Yeah, wonderfully stated, both Larry and Scott. So with that, I will motion.
I would just like to make a comment first, please. I have been serving about as long as Commissioner Quinney, and I absolutely am so pleased to see so many of you involved and here to have your voices heard. We're a volunteer organization. We do this because we love the city. We love where we live and we want to make it better. And having you here is so helpful. So those of you who have joined by Zoom, those who have sent in comments, it makes it so we understand the bigger scope. So thank you very much.
And so can I give a plug this summer? Please show up. Because then you put it out in front of yourself and you're not having to have your spring break interrupted by an application. You know, do we have to have ribs and steaks and shrimp balls to get people here? I don't know.
Yes, please. I'm hungry.
Yeah, but we really do, as the general plan goes, you know, follow the website. I can't tell you when it's going to be, but this kind of input at that time would be wonderful. So
Thank you. All right.
Ready?
He wants to do it.
Motion to post. No. I motion that we postpone this. Let me think through this. Do I have to motion that the
table this until the next meeting?
Table it, but do I have to motion anything about the public hearing?
Yeah, you'll have to say that.
So
there's not going to be a
motion that we table this meeting this item to the May 2nd meeting and
bring it back as a business item.
Bring it back as a business item. And the public. Anyway, yes. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, carries 6-0. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, our last item on the agenda, and my screen just went blank.
That's right.
Oh, item 6, text amendment.
You guys can all leave. You don't need to hang around unless you want to.
This one's exciting. You should stay around.
Yeah, this is like nail biting. Okay, item 6, text amendment, accessory dwelling units in agricultural zones. Amend the 2009 West Jordan City Code, section 135A-2, adding accessory dwelling units to the A1, A5, A20 zoning districts as a permitted. Okay, somebody went just. Anyway. Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, Larry.
I'll be quick. So the reason for this is probably last year when we did ADUs. I think we were hyper focused on the R1 and rural residential zones. Not thinking about agricultural zones and how many of those properties have dwellings on them, A1, A5 in particular, not many A20, but they're single family. And so, and there have been people who have approached the city about putting ADUs in an A5 zone. Right now, I have to say no, because we don't have code to back it up. And so the difference is that they're a single family home on a really big lot. You know, and so the impact even it's less than in a 10,000 square foot lot or so. And so basically, quickly, this will add ADUs to the A1, A5, A20 zone. As you can see on the permitted. It's got the end note 3 is a little bit different, not much, but a little bit of difference between the R1 zone and the A agricultural zones. Quite frankly, because some of those restrictions that are in the other in the R1 zone really don't make a lot of sense in the agriculture zone because of the size of the lot and the way they're able to be located on the site. And so, for instance, if you remember, and I believe everyone was on the commission at that time, with the exception of Commissioner Wynn, we had specific setbacks in the R1 10,000 foot. That's mostly what I'm dealing with, the 15 foot, then 6 from the building, and then 8, 5 and 8 on the side or whatever. The lots are large enough in an agricultural zone that they should just be required to meet the standard setbacks of that zone, which are 30, 25, 8, and 8. You know, we don't need to make exceptions for them. If they can't do it on a 5-acre lot, then they probably shouldn't be doing it. So
And that's one big size.
Yeah. And so I actually think it probably affects June here. Is yours? Yeah. So yeah, and the drakes. And so I think the drakes are R18. But anyway, that is the proposal. So it would just basically add ADUs to the ag zone. You know, I'm tired. I'm rambling, so I'll go for it.
Okay, we will make this a public hearing. Open this to anybody who would like to speak on this. We have 3 minutes. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for any comments and or.
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Okay, Commissioner Hatch.
Based on the information and findings set forth in the staff report and upon the evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for this application.
Second.
Okay, we have a second and a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, carried 6-0. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.